All right. Thank you. We're going to bring the special board meeting to order, and we'll start with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Okay, good. All right, before we go into public comment, I did just, oh, I'm so sorry. This is Chenoweth. Call the roll.
Mrs. Vance Clemens, Ms. Batik-Tiski,
Here.
Mrs. Blomgren,
Here.
Mrs. Chaikin,
Here.
Mr. Cormack,
Here.
Mrs. Cullen,
Here.
Mr. Rice,
Here.
Mr. Russell,
Here.
and Mr. Wurs.
Here.
Okay. All right, so now I may do public comment. According to policy 903, public comment, which is limited for 3 minutes, should be directed to the presiding officer rather than individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. For confidentiality and privacy rights, specific comments regarding particular individuals must be communicated privately to the school board and superintendent via email at psdschoolboard@pennridge.org. And before I call up anyone for public comment, I just did want to reiterate what we talked about at the last meeting, which is that if there's a comment that you would like to make, if it's something that you haven't brought to the attention of the school district or the school board or both by email or a phone call or something, we just ask that you give the courtesy to the people who can take care of a problem. Give them the first shot before, announcing it in public, because we have found in the past that things that were brought up here were things that the district and the board were not aware of yet. And so it's really best to go through that process of informing the proper person first and letting them try to resolve that issue for you. So with that said, if you have a comment about something that you haven't brought to the attention of someone else yet, I would ask that you refrain from making it and send us an email. But the first person on the list is Liz Deal. Did she step out? Okay. So then I have Kim Badillion. Just remember to state your name and municipality, please. The face.
Why am I not seeing smile? There's no smile. That's a lot.
Dave.
Kim Badillion, Percy Borough. A recent study issued by professors at Johns Hopkins University found that the original COVID-19 lockdown in the spring of 2020 had little to no effect on mortality. The professors performed a meta-analysis involving 34 studies as they looked at interventions such as school and business closures, travel bans, and efforts to limit gatherings to determine if there is any empirical evidence to support lockdowns. According to the study, lockdowns had little to no effect on COVID-19 mortality, and in the US and Europe only reduced COVID-19 mortality by 0.2% on average. However, the study did reveal that lockdowns had an enormous economic and social cost. From May 2020 to April 2021, the US recorded a 28.5% increase in drug overdose deaths when compared to the previous 12-month period. A study from the National Commission on COVID-19 and Criminal Justice last year found that domestic violence incidents increased 8.1% in the US after lockdown orders were issued. About 97% of US teachers said that their students had experienced learning loss during the coronavirus pandemic, according to a survey last year. The study concluded that lockdown policies were ill-founded and should be rejected as pandemic policy instrument. Closer to home, on January 7th, Bucks County experienced a daily average of 1,250 COVID-19 cases. As of yesterday, that number fell to 238, an 81% decrease. However, evidence shows that the Omicron variant, still by more transmissible, is less virulent. less severe with symptoms. Therefore, hospitalization and death rates will be more important to look at than case counts. The highest hospitalization rate in Bucks County during the Omicron wave occurred on 1/21/22, when 14-day moving average was recorded at 253. As of today, the average is 159, a 37% decrease. The height of daily deaths occurred on 1/13/22, with 11 deaths recorded. As of 2/1/22, the number of deaths fell to 2, an 82% decrease. While the BBCCW school board candidates were running in the November 2021 election, one of the elements of their platform was a return to normalcy for Pennridge students, including in-person education, mask optional, and no vaccine mandate. They also supported parents as the chief decision makers when it came to the health and safety of their children. The BBCC school board candidates, now board members, received an unprecedented number of votes compared to their opponents, providing strong evidence that a majority of the Pennridge community supported their platform. I am happy that the BBCC school board members, as well as those who remained on the board or were appointed, have followed through and are putting into place the items that were promised during the election.
Thank you. Okay, and I don't see that Ms. Deal has come back in, so we will move on.
She's
Oh,
just
did you?
walking.
Oh, okay, Ms. Steele, you had signed up for public comment. Did you want to make one or no? We can just go on if you're, okay. It's fine, we can wait until later. All right, so we will move on to committee reports. That's activities with Ms. Batisky.
Good evening. I would like to make a motion to approve the Pennridge School District Health and Safety Plan on the agenda for tonight.
I'll second that motion.
All right, it was moved by Mrs. Batisky and seconded by Mrs. Chaikin that we approve the health and safety plan. And before we go to comments from board members, I just wanted to reorient everybody on where we are. I know that we just ratified some changes, I guess a week or so ago, but those are changes that were actually made in the beginning of January, and these are changes that are coming, a month after we made the last ones. So, as you know, the governor has said that the school boards are the authority to make these decisions, and as we let you know last month, we did another review, and this health and safety plan is the result of that review. So with that said, if there are any comments from board members, I would hear them now. Okay.
Thank you. Kim took most of my comment, which is great, but I just wanted to basically say that, as Kim said, this was what we campaigned on, a return to normal. And in addition to that, the science of masks and lockdowns and vaccines is, debatable on either side. What nobody's debating are the suicide rates, domestic violence, drug overdoses, alcohol and drug dependency, depression, social and emotional development, and academic performance, all having negative impacts on our kids. So it really is time to go back to normal and let them learn in person, have the parents be in charge, make the decisions that have to do with their health, and get kids focused back on academics solely again. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries 9-0. Thank you. Back to you. Oh, sorry. Back to you, Mrs. Batisky. Was that the only?
Yeah,
There's
that's
no.
the only
There's no
Yeah.
announcement of the next activities meeting because that's tonight. Sorry. All right. And the next committee report is personnel. Mr. Russell.
It's just a motion to approve the resolution regarding employee number 1338.
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Mr. Russell and seconded by Mr. Rice. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. And I guess our next personnel meeting is also coming right after this meeting, so. That brings us back to public comment. Is there anybody that did not sign up that would like to, or was signed up and needs to? Okay, seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. Just state your name and municipality, please.
Mike McGowan, Percy Borough. I just had a question in a follow-up to an email I sent to Dr. Bolton and to the board. And now that this new health and safety plan had no pushback from anybody, which is not surprising, since you guys have all been doing such a fantastic job so far. I just asked what sources you used in coming to the conclusion for the changes and for the current health and safety board or health and safety plan that's in, or being changed, I guess, or updated. I was only told that there were a various number of sources, but nothing specific. Now, I know that you're not using the CDC, so I'm just kind of curious what other townships or districts you're basing your information off, what data you're using, and I know you guys have pledged transparency, so I'm hoping this should be an easy ask. But I think for parents to be able to know what information is being used to form certain conclusions and, amending things. So I think it would be an easy thing for you guys to provide to the public, just, what sources and information were used in changing. Because you also have, in the health and safety plan, you have links that you can click on, and they all go to CDC websites, which is shocking because they recommend universal K through 12 masking and testing and all this, and you guys are doing away with all of that to go to just a flu model. So if you could follow up with that tomorrow, or if you have time tonight, you could answer it, that'd be amazing. But I think we all should know, in the effort of transparency, I think we should all know what sources you guys are using. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I guess we can, no need. Okay, so for announcements, I did want to refer back to, I had spoken about a letter to the Secretary of Education Cardona, which I'll provide to you, Mrs. Chenoweth, for the record, the minutes. But the board did decide to send a communication to Secretary Cardona to ask him about that NSBA letter, his involvement in it, and just to see, what his answer is for those allegations. But I will provide that so that the public could see it in the record. And our next school board meeting is scheduled for Monday, February 28th, 2022, and I have a motion to adjourn.
Second it.
All right. We're adjourned.
We take a 2-minute.
Yeah.
Ms. Cooper, we're going to take a 2-minute break just to transition to the next committee, so if you would let us know when the live stream's down.
That's okay. I almost got it.
Welcome back. We are going to start the curriculum committee meeting, and since I haven't seen much of a change in the attendees, I won't read the public comment policy again, but we do have one person signed up for public comment. That's Sharon Parks.
Hello, Sharon Parks. I am a high school chemistry teacher, and I would respectfully like to ask this opportunity to ask the board to think very carefully before voting yes to the proposed changes to remove the double periods from chemistry, especially from honours chemistry. My colleagues and I are incredibly proud of the chemistry program we teach and the successes of our students in the science programs and beyond Pennridge. We believe removing the lab periods would be detrimental to our students' acquisition of new skills and the ability to compete at the highest level at college. We believe that in removing the double periods, the cons far outweigh the pros. The reasons for our thoughts are far too comprehensive to explain in this 3-minute slot. We would like to take the opportunity to give a full account of our rationales in the form of a letter, or if you so choose, we would invite you to reach out to one of us, myself, or any of our colleagues, or all of our colleagues in the chemistry department, for a formal or an informal discussion. Thank you.
Okay. That is the only public comment we have. The science. Oh, you missed the sign up. Okay. All right. I guess if you want to come down. This is about a curriculum committee agenda item. That's actually not on, is it? So that would be the second comment period, please. Yes. Okay.
Dual enrollment will be part of the graduation.
Oh.
Dual enrollment will be part of
Okay. Well, actually, I guess the dual enrollment. Sorry.
That's right.
I'm helping you get your steps
Good
in.
part of your work, yes.
So, sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Tom Skiffington from Hilltown Township. The reason I came out for dual enrollment is I had the experience of two of my children going through the school district, one doing dual enrollment, and it tremendously helped my daughter. She wound up getting through college in 4 years. She was ahead of the game and did extremely well. When my second daughter was ready to go for dual enrollment, the school district had changed their policies. It was one of the other few times that I've attended those board meetings. Unfortunately, the school district didn't change their policy, and she was not available to go through the dual enrollment like my prior daughter did, and she did not benefit from it. She didn't struggle through college, but she was not as well prepared. I would encourage you to open up dual enrollment for any child that's able to do it. It is a great program. It helps the children. It does not affect how many teachers you're going to have or the union or anything like that. It is a benefit to the children. Parents pay for it, so you're not going to have tons of children go for it. But I think it should be available for any child who wants it.
Tracy Hill, Bedminster Township, former employee of Pennridge High School, worked here for 32 years. I was the guidance counselor in charge of dual enrollment when it was changed back in 2006 or 7. And during that time period, we helped a ton of children. So I'm here, I was disappointed when the policy changed and it made it more difficult for it to happen. I know personally the union came and spoke to me because they had a problem with dual enrollment because they were worried about the loss of teachers, and as Tom has reiterated, no teachers were lost during that time period. It's a select amount of kids that end up going, but I just wanted to point out, I'll give you 2 examples of 2 children that it changed their lives. One girl became pregnant as a 10th grader and was going to quit school, and she was going to be homeschooled, but very active, very well liked. Her mom came to me in tears, like, what can we do? Brought that situation to Tom Creedon, and then Tom Creedon went to Bob Kish, and she was a special circumstance. And this is one of those things I want you to think about, the special circumstances that make a difference in a kid's life, because our job is to do what's best for the kids, not pigeonhole them into what we think it should be, and give them an opportunity to be successful. So she got to go to dual enrollment full time. I'm not saying that that's what should be done for every student, but there are cases in which this could be the ideal situation for them. She ended up getting her associate's degree and her diploma from Pennridge by her senior year, what would have been her senior year, and went on to Gwen and Mercy Nursing School and is a full-time nurse, mother of 4, married, perfectly happy, and she will tell you that that was the thing that changed her life. Another situation, as a guidance counselor, I know what kids, I hear what kids need. I hear the complaints, I hear the sad stories, the sob stories. I had another student who was bullied nonstop. I mean, we did everything we could to try to help this girl, and to the point where she was going to quit. So again, it was another situation, go to the principal, go to the superintendent, talk to them about what can we do to help this girl, and we ended up with half days, so that the periods where she wasn't being bullied, she continued her classes here and went over to the Bucks County Community College. And at Bucks County Community College, she fit in. She got on their committees. She was a changed person because, again, she didn't fit in this, what we expect our students to fit into. And by giving her that opportunity, she flourished. Along with that, I know that you're looking at changing the credits to 24 credits. Again, being that person that was in charge of all the kids that were ready to quit school or not going to graduate, and trying to find some way to maneuver a schedule or a class or a way that they can get credits, we got really creative with some of those kids. And when you go to 24 credits, I'm really concerned that there's no room for failure. There's no room for failure. I know it. I've experienced it. What are you, 22.75, I think it is? What is it now?
We're currently 24.
You are 24? Okay, I didn't realize it changed, so I apologize. But every kid could have a bad year. Something could go wrong in the family. They could get mixed up in the wrong things, and if they fail one class, it makes it next to impossible for them to graduate, and they give up and they quit, and then your dropout rate starts to raise, and I don't want to see that. I just want you to really think hard about the dual enrollment, just because it can come into play for kids that really need it. There are kids that are extremely brilliant and don't show it when they're in high school, but when they get out to college, they're a changed person just because something isn't right here. So again, not saying open it up to the world. I mean, you can open up, but not that many kids are going to go because they have to pay for it. So there is a cost involved in it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I apologize for, it's kind of awkward to have a committee meeting in the big room. I don't feel like we can have the same kind of conversation, but I hope that we will have a good one. The first item we have is the Honors Laboratory Techniques Program Improvement Proposal with Dr. Dormer.
Good evening, everyone, and Mrs. Cullen. I thought it made some sense if I would give some context to the first proposals, because Dr. Dormer, as Mrs. Cullen indicated, she will be presenting a Honors Laboratory Techniques course. And as you heard from Mrs. Sparks, one of the things that we'll be talking about in the scope of rethinking our graduation requirements, we will be talking about chemistry double lab periods. So Dr. Dormer will talk about a new course that will help us balance out skill development for that course. In addition, Mr. Vogel will be talking about a personal finance honors course. That's also within the scope of the graduation requirements presentation that will follow. So I just wanted to do an introduction to let you know that you're going to hear a lot of information about those two things, and then I will do the presentation and show the context of both. So, Dr. Dormer.
Board members, I just want to remind you that the presentations are both on your laptops as attachments. They're also behind you, so whatever is easier for you. I know it's not the best space in terms of watching the presenter and watching the presentation, but it's available both places for you.
Thank you, Dr. Scheid, and thank you to the school board for listening to our proposal this evening. As was mentioned, we are proposing the addition of an honors laboratory techniques course that will focus on the techniques and skill development that is outlined by the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards, and the Pennsylvania standards that are in development that should hopefully be dropped upon us within the next year or 2 years. And also in response to, compensating for the proposed changes to the current laboratory schedule. So our laboratory techniques course will focus on applied science and STEAM, safety, proper use of equipment, analysis and data collection, experimentation, statistics, notebook and record keeping, reports, graphing techniques, computational thinking, communication through research, presentations, and we'll have a bit of a chemistry emphasis due to the fact that chemistry techniques tend to be the most specialized and most broadly extended to other branches of science. They're also most applicable to other fields of study, especially those in the STEAM and STEM fields. As you will notice in the proposal, we're not asking for much in the way of funding. The proposal requests minimal costs in terms of professional development and curriculum writing. So we expect to have a small team of teachers focused on these efforts, and every effort will be made so that there's minimal to no overlap, and these experiences will be supplemental and complementary to those already provided in our science courses and to the laboratory experiences that will be adjusted with the proposed changes to chemistry. Any questions about our proposal?
Dr. Dormer, just a couple pieces of clarification.
Yes.
I think I see in the proposal this is for students in grades 10 through 12,
Correct.
which would mean there would be multiple science classes the students would be involved in. This would still be appropriate for them, even though they might be in different science classes at the same time, in terms of developing those skills.
It was most suitable and would make the most sense for chemistry students to take, but it will be designed with everybody in mind so that the techniques that will be taught and experienced would be applicable to any student in 10 through 12.
And it would be an everyday semester course, which is half a credit.
Correct.
Is that correct?
6 days per cycle, so meeting every day for a semester. Primarily taught by the same teacher, I would imagine, both semesters, fall and spring. So there's some continuity as well.
And this would carry the honors weight, then it is an honors course.
We are proposing the initial offering to be at the honors level, because we anticipate the greatest amount of interest from students at that level. And then we will evaluate as the year progresses to see if we also want to add a second year option for those at the academic level.
Thank you.
Ms. Blanca?
My questions are, to see if I'm understanding this correctly, this would replace one of the double lab?
Well, if the double lab periods go away, this would be an option, a choice for students to enroll in, and they would add this additional semester-based course to their schedule, so that they would have an additional opportunity to develop some of the key skills and techniques that they may not get to develop as extensively within the science course.
Okay, and then that follows up with my next question, because you mentioned the things that you guys would focus on. It was earlier on, I was trying to quickly write them down, but you also mentioned about like chemistry being the most specialized. So some of the things that you were mentioning, in my mind, I was thinking those would be the things that would what I'm imagining being done in the chemistry double labs already. So could you decipher maybe a little bit more specifically where some things would touch on in this course?
Well, many of the things that are currently being done with the double periods are because we have the additional time to do it and to deepen the investigations and to really kind of extend and develop those techniques over the course of 2 periods rather than 1. To be honest, there are some labs that just can't be paused midstream. I mean, it is chemistry, experiments and reactions happen. So some of those experiences would need to be modified if the lab periods were reduced. And we envision maybe being able to simulate and or extend or build different types of experiences that would offer the same kind of skill development in this lab techniques course.
Ron, did I see you also wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm listening to the answers real quick.
Okay.
Nothing.
I guess just the big picture, I'm still struggling to understand. Or is the double chemistry lab and this class, are they exclusive of each other? Like if we get rid of one, this will be added. If we keep both labs, this will still be added as a class. What's
Independent,
the
right?
connection,
That's a good question.
the background?
This course became in development and discussion as we were having conversation around the possibility of eliminating double labs. Because obviously if you eliminate double labs, then they're losing time in lab. And so how do you replicate some of that time? Now, it's not one for one because it's not a 90-minute period like the double labs are currently, where you can do some things that are that long. These would be 2 45-minute period experiences where you would have your science class for 45 minutes and then you would have this lab class for 45 minutes. Obviously, the curriculum would have to be designed so that these lab experiences come alongside any science course that you're taking, and they're applicable. Now, they're going to be heavy in chemistry because of the specificity in terms of those lab techniques, but it wouldn't preclude someone in 10th or 12th grade, chemistry is primarily 11th grade in Pennridge, from taking and benefiting from that course if this is something they look towards college. I believe the department, and Dr. Comer, correct me if I'm wrong, the thought process behind this is our students who are getting ready to go to college and might want to be involved in a major that involves around labs or research, that this could benefit them to learn some of those extra skills that would come alongside that might be missing if the 90-minute lab periods were to be reduced. We've had no conversation about if we don't change the lab periods, whether this is then still a valuable course. That would have to be a separate conversation.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, I'm trying to understand, and these questions were very helpful, but, so this one is a new course. Is it similar to anything else that you have right now? Or is it similar to the 90-minute one? Or is it similar to anything else where they're teaching the same things? Is this just an honors level one that is existing already or not?
It is not existing.
Okay.
This would be a brand new course that will require development from our curriculum team, and we will put obviously a very careful thought into developing the curriculum and designing the laboratory skills and activities that would go into this course, and it would extend over the semester. But no, it is not like anything that we currently have, nor, again, is it meant to replace anything that might be eliminated. It's meant to more supplement and complement, the adjustments that will need to be made if the lab periods disappear.
Okay. So for the 90-minute, are they doing very similar things but not as structured, or is this a separate, like the 90-minute, I understand the length of the experiments and things take time, and
right.
There's a lot of value in that also, but how will that replace the shorter, are you just going to do shorter experiments, or just?
We haven't had detailed discussions about how we're going to adjust our labs to fit the 45-minute, periods just yet, because, nothing's been finalized at this point. It would take some, careful adjustment for sure. One of the areas that I think we're concerned of, and Mrs. Parks alluded to it earlier, is that right now we're permitted to do a lot of student-driven inquiry, where students design a lot of their own experiments and figure out the best ways to test and evaluate and collect the data and perform the analyses. We're concerned that we might lose a little bit of that ability with the 45-minute versus a 90-minute time frame. So, the proposal of this lab course would be to try to continue and to generate, opportunities for students to engage in that kind of inquiry, where they are planning from scratch and developing their own investigations and really developing some of those key research skills.
Anyone else? Did you? Okay, because I'll wait.
Just a quick question, because it says that kids would have to qualify for this in 11th or 12th grade if they've met their prerequisites, but it seems like this course is educating them on more of the process for how to do labs and experiments. So I would have thought this course would have been more of a prerequisite for the other courses rather than the other way around. Does that make sense?
It does. We tried to find the right balance for what would be required prior to, versus concurrent with. And that part, I guess we could say, is still open to some discussion and evaluation. I don't know that we found exactly the right blend or timing on when to offer it. We thought it would be best to offer this opportunity to students in 10th through 12th grade. Most of them have obviously completed biology, but are either going to be concurrently enrolled in physics and or chemistry at that point, not necessarily have completed those. So we can adjust those to be concurrent enrollment with, because in our opinion, and I think I speak for most of our science folks, we think these types of things go hand in hand. As you're developing and acquiring knowledge, you also want to be able to develop those skills and be able to apply them to real situations and extend it beyond the classroom. So, finding that right kind of blend of when that occurs, that can obviously be adjusted. So I would say let's, alter the language to be at minimum concurrent with Physics 1 and or Chemistry 1 moving forward.
If this is an elective and not a required course, do you expect there to be enough interest in learning the techniques as opposed to, the full-on, if they can just jump right into the labs and skip the technique course? You know what I mean? Do you think that there would be enough interest in doing it if it's optional?
I actually do.
Okay.
Again, the types of investigations and things you're able to do with a dedicated lab course and or a 90-minute period are far different than those that are embedded within the course itself. There's also a distinct advantage, and we've heard from recent graduates, and I can tell you now, I teach as an adjunct at Penn State Lehigh Valley. I do a lab course, and it's evident from day one which students have had key lab experiences and which ones haven't. So knowing that, that our students are leaving us with a distinct advantage over many of their peers is a point of pride for us, and that's one that we would strongly advertise, give a nice little sales pitch for, if you will. And it does show the students have interest in developing these kinds of key skills and gaining, not an advantage per se, but just the ability to walk in the door of whatever they do post-secondary with kind of a basis for moving forward. It's an employability skill as well. Problem solving is a key thing that a lot of employers seek in this day and age.
Thank you. One last question. When you talk about eliminating that additional lab time that's built into the course that causes a lot of downtime with study halls, if by pooling that into this specific course, that would utilize all of the time as opposed to it being, scattered throughout the year and then eating up an extra block. Don't you think that that puts our kids at a higher advantage because they're still getting that piece, but they're getting it separated in its own course as opposed to extended randomly onto another course and then eating up more of their schedule where they can't take something else? I mean, do you think the net gain by breaking it up and doing it this way is more of a benefit over the old system or current system?
I actually think that's arguable because the embedded experiences that we have are connected to the content that we're covering and also really tied in very meaningfully to ask students to make connections to the other courses that they are taking as well. So it's really thoughtful in the way that it's planned. It doesn't feel scattered to us at all. It actually feels very, deliberate and meticulous, and to be able to say that, we're developing or we're doing these lab experiences at these different points in the curriculum for a very good reason. And we really feel like those skills and that progression comes within the course is probably just as valuable or even more so than something that is just a lab course on its own, a separate thing.
Okay, thank you. I think when I said scattered, just to be clear, I didn't mean, I know it's deliberate. What I meant is, you end up with 2 or 3 lab days and then study hall days. And so when I say scattered, I meant more scheduling wise, that you end up with classes some of those days, but then you end up with all of that dead time in between. That's kind of what I meant, not that, because I know they're all deliberate and important. So just to clarify that.
I could say a lot of our students use their study hall time on their data analysis, because there's not a single one of us that lets them walk out of there with a 1 or 2 sentence conclusion. So they're thinking about things and processing the information long after they leave that lab experience. That's one of the other key pieces that we don't want to see kind of disappear or fall by the wayside.
Okay, so I do have a couple of questions. I guess I don't know if I'm not understanding the proposal. I don't feel comfortable with when you had said that the working out how you would adjust things hasn't been done yet. I would have preferred to see that worked out before this, because we're going to make a decision about something. I feel like maybe after you look at it, you won't be able to figure out how to work it out, and then we're in a pickle. We've already made a decision to change something. And if you can just explain, if the double labs were to be eliminated, then would all kids actually have the ability to take this course? Or is it possible that some kids would end up missing that lab experience because they wouldn't be able to get in this course? I can't say I'm comfortable with the idea that children wouldn't have labs in their science classes. So I would like to hear more about that. And then I have one other question.
Let me try to clarify those two, and then Dr. Dormer, if you want to add to that. This proposal was not given to the department enough time for them to do serious curriculum work. And so there obviously are other traditionally scheduled high schools that have this model that don't have a double lab period built in. There are some that do. Obviously, block scheduling allows a 90-minute period, so schools that are in block, I'm sure, have 90-minute lab periods as part of their experience. And so the curriculum for the chemistry program would obviously have to be looked at because there is less time. It's probably not as simple as simply removing the 90-minute labs and figuring what goes in their place and having that deliberate piece, although that would be the easier part of the two of those because there is a set curriculum in place. Although we are, sorry, yeah, no, I touched it. We are confident that our department could, taking a look at the biology, the physics, the chemistry, and some of the senior options, take a look at what are those skills that they can augment, that because there is lab work going on in all of our science courses. So this would not eliminate chemistry labs. We're talking about the possibility of eliminating double labs in terms of having that 90-minute experience, which does change. There are some things that obviously have that fit a 90-minute time frame that would not fit into a 45. And it's not the same thing to have this 45 and then have a new 45 on top of it, because they're not going to be guaranteed to be the same teacher, same content, those pieces. But to be able to work on some of those targeted lab skills that students might need for the next level in terms of college or as they move into other science work would be something that we're confident that our teachers would be able to develop that would be valuable for our kids.
Okay, and I apologize. That was a question that I didn't think of until I was listening to what you had said. Then my other, I guess it's kind of the same question, but how do they possibly get all of, so if this course is going to be all the different sciences, how do we actually give them the full chemistry, the full physics, that, you know, if it's going to be touching on all of those areas within this techniques course? I'm wondering what they're going to be losing from the full experience, you know, if they're not going to get all of the content of it, if we're going to eliminate something else.
I don't know that we're talking about eliminating any experiences. Like Dr. Bolton has said, biology and physics have not had the double period for a few years now, and they still do lab experiences. So if we added this lab techniques course for those two especially, we would be kind of adding to or enhancing what's happening in those particular labs. What would be probably the biggest change would be the adjustments in chemistry, and that would simply be because the change would be new, right? So the adjustments to the current course as it stands would have to be made from going from the double period to being, 6 days per cycle, all 45-minute periods, and then looking at how can we best supplement that with this lab techniques course to give them, as you mentioned, the full chemistry experience as closely as possible. It's not going to match up perfectly, right, because there are some things that just require a 90-minute period, and we're not going to be able to match it with two 45s that are not necessarily connected. But we will do the very best that we can to make sure that we are developing and offering students the opportunities to develop those key skills that they would get from those longer experiences, modifying things as needed to create that possibility.
So yeah, and it just brought to mind another question was the 90-minute, how often do they do this? And then how much lab time would they have on this new program?
The current
Per
model
week.
is 1 day out of the 6-day cycle. They have a double period, so they meet 7 periods on a 6-day cycle.
Okay.
Right, and this would be 1 day, well, every day of the cycle for a semester. So this would be 6 days of the cycle for a semester instead of
So
a year.
would they get more in-depth lab work to do, or, I mean, from a strict time base? I understand it'd be great to have 90 minutes, but are they getting more experience under the
From
new
a
program?
time for time, like minute for minute,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it is a possibility, sure. It really depend on, how the course ends up being structured. But in terms of a time basis, yeah, there would be more dedicated time to laboratory techniques with the new course.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I just want to clarify, so I wrote down that you asked a second question that I didn't answer. One of the things that you'll learn in the proposal, one of the reasons we're making the recommendations we are, is that both the double lab periods as well as something that is going on in our health and PE program are forcing the vast majority of our students into study halls 2 different times during their career, once in 10th grade and once in 11th grade. And our expectation through these proposals, if you were to adopt them, is that it would take those 2 long periods, they would take the full credit in 10th grade and 11th grade, and allow students to fill it with what they choose to take. And so yes, they could choose to take this lab, and it would be a 0.5, and they could have another 0.5 behind it, because it would be semester and semester, which is much easier to fit together. What happens with the lab periods right now is if it's only 1 day in that cycle, the other 5 days of the cycle you need to fill that. And we don't have anything that fills all 5 of them. We hope that students can find things to fill 3 of them, so they might only have study hall 2 of the 6 days. But in some cases, students have study hall 5 of the 6 days because they either don't choose to or they can't find something that fits in their schedule opposite the lab period. And so from a time standpoint, yes, because obviously this would be the equivalent of 3 days per cycle. It would be half the year. Currently, they're doing 1/6 of the year. So it is from a time period 3 times the amount of time. That's not the same experience, right? Because the 90s are a different experience than 245s. And so to answer your question, yes, it is 3 times the amount of time they would commit for the students who choose this course. And that's another difference. It's not every student required to have that. The vast majority of our students take chemistry of some form. This would be students who would be choosing this, which wouldn't be anywhere near the same number, would be my guess.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there, and anybody can address it, I suppose, but is there any benefit in making this solely for chemistries and then having the double lab period and having to supplement that for the additional 6 days, or only do it with 5 days or something like that? So you're still getting credit for it, but it's a supplement specifically for the chemistry class, so that you're not, if I'm hearing correctly, what's driving the elimination of the double lab is that you have too much downtime and people can't fill it. Well, why not use this as a supplement to come alongside almost and fill it that way, so that if you wanted to have the double lab, then you take this class as well?
And I think one of the situations would be the number of students who would not want to choose that. And so if they choose not to take this supplement, right, it would work for the students who want to fill it. But for the students who don't, they don't have the option to fill it with what they would choose to fill it with. We would be requiring them to take more, which I'm sure the chemistry department would be thrilled with.
But is that the only double lab, the chemistry?
In 11th grade, the chemistry. There are some APs, there are some 12th grade, other science courses, but in 9th, 10th, and 11th, chemistry is the only primary science that's taken that has double lab periods.
So,
Is there, can you address that too? What do you think about that concept, Dr. Dorn?
As Dr. Bolin just mentioned, that would be a chemistry teacher's dream, If our students had the double lab period and then augmented it with a lab techniques course on top of that, I think we'd all just have a little party, at the end of the day and just celebrate, the time that we get for our students to apply. We're always looking for ways to engage them in experiences, but we notice that the light bulb just goes off so much brighter when they're able to make those connections and see it and do it and feel it, fully experience it and observe it in every possible way. So.
Is
So-
there, oh, sorry.
No, just the question, I brought up another question. So if they're taking 11th grade chemistry, do they always get the double lab? Does that come with it? Okay, so that's the way, and so you would change it now that they wouldn't have to, they would get rid of the double period lab. Would it go to a single one, or, and then the optional course of this? Is that?
Yeah, so chemistry, yeah, so this happened back in 2017 with physics, which was our primary 10th grade course. That prior to that time, physics had a double lab period, similar to what we're talking about in terms of chemistry. And so that would mean 1 day per cycle you have your science for 90 minutes. The other 5 days, you have it for 45. It's a regular class in terms of time period. The recommendation is that chemistry would remain a everyday course. You would still have chemistry for 45 minutes every day. You just would not have the double lab experience. And so instead, think about it, it's period 1 and period 2. That period 2 is where that study hall ends up falling because you only have double labs some days and other things that fill it. And instead, you'd have a whole block open to be able to fill it with social studies or music or more science, if you want to take another science course.
Okay.
Sorry. Does the AP have a double lab at present? So if that would continue, even if the double lab was discontinued for the general chemistry class?
Can you speak to the number of lab periods in terms of AP? Because that's different depending on the course, and then I'll answer his second question.
Sure. Most of our AP science classes have actually 2 double periods per cycle. And that is to meet the requirements set forth by the College Board and to maintain our AP designation. If you look at most introductory level science courses at the higher education level, they are 2 semesters with a 3-hour lab per semester. So in order to cover that curriculum with integrity, we feel like the 2 lab periods are essential, because that gives our students, the 6 days of, continuity of 45-minute periods, but 2 of the days they're meeting for 90. And that's when they're getting those more, involved inquiry-based lab experiences that are dictated by the College Board, that, are more involved in depth and student-generated and created, that they can dive a little deeper and adequately cover the curriculum.
And I'm sorry, did you say that was all AP or just chemistry?
No, it is AP Biology, AP Environmental Science, AP Chemistry, and AP Physics C have the 2 additional lab periods per cycle for the AP courses.
So the answer is most of the APs, but not all of them. So there are some APs that don't have the double lab period in terms of that time. Obviously, the concept behind why the recommendation in terms of eliminating what we call forced study halls and allowing kids to be able to fill their schedule the way they want to fill it beyond our requirements is the same conversation in AP. Because of the AP requirements, it is a far larger curriculum hall, and so it is not anything that we're recommending for next year, but we'll continue to have that conversation about what does that look like, what does it need to be, is there another way to get at that? That is primarily senior year. There are some options where students could get it as early as 11th, but generally those are seniors, which means those schedules tend to have a little more Swiss cheese in them for many kids in terms of not having to fill it to a full 7 credits if they choose not to. And so that's a conversation for next year. But this proposal is only talking about the chemistry course for 11th grade. We have not started thinking about what AP, if we were going to do a recommendation that's similar, what that would look like or not.
It sounds too, from what Ms. Parks was commenting on, that the chemistry teachers want to keep the double lab. I would be interested in just hearing more from the teachers as to why they want to keep it as is, and maybe even give reasons, because there are 5 days to fill that time period, like kind of like the pros and cons, and I don't know, just more information on that. I would be interested in that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am too. I definitely would like to see more information. I feel rushed, and I don't like, feeling rushed with something like this. If you have, you referenced other schools that do this. I think I would like to see how their student achievement, how that was affected or not affected. And at the school board meeting, when this was brought out, we had no idea about this proposal, but there were comments made at the school board meeting, and one of them was about the timing for students to choose their schedules for next year. And I would have to agree that making this decision now is going to jam them up a little bit, and so I'm also concerned about that.
2 things. I just want to remind the board and inform the public that we are on purpose, based on board feedback, slowing down the curriculum process. And so this is not something that, unless the board is completely comfortable, we were expecting a vote in February. This was something that we thought would take at least 2 months and maybe even longer, because this is only one of the proposals we're making tonight. And so there are other things to talk about that I'm sure you'll have questions about, and I appreciate that. What we have done is the guidance counselors are aware. The guidance counselors do understand that this may or may not go into effect for next year. They have been speaking to students about if you needed another alternate for your junior year, what would that be? So that the vast majority of students we wouldn't need to go back to, because they would just simply say, okay, if I had another period, here's what I would do with it. We obviously have also said that this is a unique year, which means we need to be very flexible. If there is a change, even if the change happens in March and not in February, to be able to explain it to, it's primarily our 10th grade families that would be impacted, explain it to them and give them the opportunity to come back to their guidance counselor and say, well, I've changed my mind based on these rules. I'd now like to sign up for X, Y, and Z, and we would allow them to do that. So our guidance counselors are aware, they're working with their kids as best they can through the process because the timing is happening now. It is very unlikely that our timing will match that, and we know that. And so we will be flexible with the students and take as much time as the board needs to make a good decision.
Is it possible
You
to
answered
get-
my question that I was going to ask, the timing of the goal.
Is it possible to get feedback from students who've taken it to say, hey, do you think that extra extended lab period was more beneficial to you than all of the kind of dead time was as a negative? Just try to get feedback from them to see people who've experienced the course. Would they prefer, do they feel like it was more beneficial to leave it the same, or do they think they would have benefited more from being able to put another course in there? And I know one of the discussions we had prior, and I can't remember if this got fixed when we talked about class rank, and I don't really care about class rank, but I know a lot of people do, was the impact that this kind of dead time had on kids who were in the sciences, that they wouldn't be able to rank as high as some of the other kids because they couldn't take that extra class in that period. And so is that something that we were able to fix? Because I know we had some fixes, but it was long enough ago that I don't remember what the fixes were.
The way weighted classes work in terms of GPA, because there's no more the reward for taking more credits, it's just based off the credits you take and you're weighted. But obviously, if I've taken more weighted courses than you have, I'm at an advantage, assuming we get the same grades. But if we both get a bunch of A's and I have 8 weighted classes and you only have 7, my GPA is going to be higher than yours. And so yes, there would be some students, although the vast majority of students we're talking about take chemistry in 11th grade, and so it's pretty much everyone's at the same disadvantage if you see it as a disadvantage. I'm not aware of any students who are skirting the system in some way to get an extra credit out of us that is weighted. It is one of the reasons why I think the proposal in terms of this being an honors course, to make sure that as we're looking at the type of student who might be doing this in college, but also to try to say to students, okay, this is a weighted course, and so they might shy away from an elective that's not weighted, perhaps, if it's an academic.
Is it possible for them to take a cyber, like a cyber gym or something else that we offer, and then that's not really assigned to a specific block, so they could still do that? I mean, do they have that option, or does that push them over what they're allowed to take? And then just if you can circle back to my feedback question from kids who took the course.
I don't know if students are taking cyber courses. Obviously, we have cyber available to them. I don't know if there are students who are doing that to fill that time in terms of the credit piece. We can take a look at feedback with students. I've had this conversation with some staff members about how to gain that, because writing the question will be very, very difficult, because you're asking people to say, do you like what you had, or do you like what it could have been? Will they have an experience that could have been? And so, yes, I'll work on that in terms of what those questions could look like for our current seniors, because they'd be the ones who we'd be talking to, at least the ones that are easy to get at, in terms of what that question or questions could look like to get the information that you're asking, because they don't know any different, So, but we'll think about that in terms of what those questions could be.
Okay, I think it would just be, was that extra 45-minute block every cycle worth it, or would you have benefited more from eliminating that and having the opportunity to take an additional course? And some of them may say, I would have liked to take that extra course, and some of them may say, I was so overwhelmed with how much work I was doing that I wouldn't have wanted to take an extra course anyway. Or kids in that science field would know how beneficial that was or wasn't to them. I mean, to your point though, I think there's some kids who would probably say, there's going to be some kids who took the course because they needed to take the course, and then there's going to be other kids who took the course because they love science. And it would be interesting to see too how that breaks down, because you may get a different answer from kids who are taking the course because they had to check that box versus kids who really love that field.
Okay. All right, I think that it's pretty evident what, we're looking for, some more information. I'm glad that we don't have to make the decision at the February board meeting, because it does seem like we need a little bit more explanation to be confident. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dorn.
All right, oh, that's me. Okay, so the next item is the Algebra 2 and Geometry textbooks with Mr. Vogel.
Good evening. As you know,
Mr. Vogel, would you turn on the microphone, please? Thank you.
It's not like I've never done this before. So, as you know, we started the process of curriculum renewal a few years ago. In math, we wanted to increase the rigor of our core courses. Core courses being Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Pre-Calc, and Calc. So we began looking at our courses through a vertical articulation lens. And what we mean by that was we looked at across vertically all the courses, and we found overlapping content among the courses. And so what we did is we pulled them out, and we were able to insert more additional topics that allowed us to go more in depth into what we were learning. And as we're doing that, we've been writing curriculum to increase the depth of the topics we were exploring in each course. One of our goals over time with this is to increase the number of students taking higher level mathematics. So as we have moved through the renewal process, we realized we were in need of updated resources for our students and our teachers in both Algebra 2 and Geometry, as one of the books we use is 17 years old, and I can no longer find them. In fact, during the first year of the pandemic, I had to go to Amazon and buy them one at a time because we couldn't share books. So the secretary of the high school is still, she's just barely talking to me now. So, and the other book is over 20 years old. And so what's happening here is many of the real world problems that we use are very outdated in the books. The context of the math content is so outdated and requires explanations that it gets in the way of the math we're doing. So, we informally began looking at curricular textbook options last year. We didn't find the match we were looking at. We looked at a number of just textbooks alone. And as we were doing that, what we realized is that we wanted not just the textbook, but the resources to go with it, the digital resources. So we tabled the investigation until this year. And our goal was to find the resources that would allow us to meet the needs of all the students in order to increase the rigor across the board of all the courses. So we had 4 presentations that previewed the books and the digital resources that were available. During the presentations, we also kept an eye on the resources that would fully integrate with both Canvas and ClassLink, very important for the high school students. Although we knew there wouldn't be any exact matches to the curriculum, and I'll explain that in a second, particularly for Algebra 2, that we have been developing, we decided to find resources that fit the students' needs to engage with the curriculum. This would include enrichment options, one of the biggest things we were looking for, remediation options, additional scaffolding videos for students, as well as formal and informal assessment options. The proposed textbook offers us all the components that we mentioned. And I did mention that there was no exact match, and that's because we use matrices. We have a unit of matrices in Algebra 2. Many districts, I won't say most, many districts have matrices in pre-calculus. We like it as part of, again, to enrich the experience earlier. We like matrices right where it is. So even though there's not an exact match in any of the textbook series we looked at, we can develop the matrices unit enough that we feel comfortable keeping that in the curriculum. The students will have access to support videos that can be used in the classroom and at home for independent work and studying support. The assessment piece is also very important with what it's going to provide us because it gives us 5 different assessments that are fully customizable to our needs. So as I conclude the Algebra 2 and geometry piece here, I want to draw your attention to the, you all have the proposal, right? So one of the things that we looked at is licenses versus books. You'll notice there's a discrepancy in the amount of books I'm asking for versus digital licenses. And that's because what I'm looking for is class sets of books. And then digital licenses for all students. Most kids are going to relish the idea of not carrying a big textbook home with them. So we're going to have, the licenses are there, the books will be there, and for those that do need to take a hardback book home, we're also getting an extra class set that'll be available for those that want to be able to take that home. The other thing that, as we were going through this, when I was getting the quotes for it, we were down to 2 main publishers that really fit our needs out of the ones that we looked at. And of that, I had them give competing quotes, which were pretty close. And then what we did was the industry standard is typically a 6-year license when you get it for textbooks. What I had them do is they're going to give us a 7th year bundle with it, and then they're giving us an additional class set of Algebra 2 books, and they ended up coming in at $2,500 less than the original quote. So I had the 2 companies compete against each other, and then once we did that, then we worked on the quote to get that down and get the extra year out of it. So I was pretty excited about that. And in closing for this, the addition of the textbook will support our implementation of a robust curriculum that I feel will greatly benefit our students.
Christine, a question. So I like hearing about increasing the number of students taking higher level math. What would be ways that we would accomplish that? How would we get more students taking higher level math? Would these resources help them retain better or make it more interesting to learn?
We're actually hoping, yeah, as they learn better on what the options are, especially for the, not just the remediation. We've always been pretty good at remediation, but where I really wanted to also make sure that we focused on was enrichment as well.
Okay.
And so some of these resources are going to give us the opportunity to really kind of, what I'm hoping is to hook the kids in and really get them, when they're ready, at the readiness level, take them up that next level.
First, I just want to say I really appreciate the amount of effort you put into determining what is the best match, and the fact that when last year you weren't really finding a good match, rather than just picking the lesser evil, you decided to push it back to this year to make sure that you really got a good fit for what you were looking for. I really appreciate that, because that extra year, you took clearly made you find resources that were a better fit for what you're looking for long term, and this is a huge investment that impacts a lot of kids over a pretty large period of time. And so I appreciate the thoroughness, and that's something that is really important to me, so I just wanted to thank you for that. I'm not a big fan of all these digital licenses, but I know that's the direction that everybody's going. I like the thought as, getting the bundles for, at least, so you just have you're not buying all these extra ones, they're not going to be taking them all home, so I appreciate that as well. I'm curious, after the 7 years, if you decide that you want to purchase additional digital access,
right,
what does that look like? Do they have a price for that? What would happen at that point?
Yeah, in the packet, it's about $90 as opposed to $133, $134 for the full-blown both book and digital license. And then you can argue that as well going forward.
But they wouldn't lock you in. You'd have to basically renegotiate that probably in 7 years. Is that?
Yeah. Now,
right?
in a couple of years, I would look to see if we could extend.
Okay.
It was 30 years ago, but I spent a couple of years in car sales, so I do like the deal.
That's perfect. Great.
Oh.
So every kid will get undercoats.
They're going to meet their match.
All right.
I just
Ron,
had
did you
a question. So 360 books is what on the
Yes.
quantity, and then, so the additional, they all come with a license, right?
Yes.
And then you get 115 more?
Yes.
So that's
And one of the
the extra you were talking about?
Yeah, and one of the courses is like 490 total, and the other one's like 504 or something like that,
Okay.
but yes. Yep.
So the online part, do you have any details on that? You said, obviously, the books we have don't have a digital presence, but what would be the advantages? Is this practice? Is it stuff that they can use at home that they can do extra work on, or just give me some?
Yes.
Yeah, I assume it's that, but I
So,
would like to know.
that's the whole thing, what you just mentioned, is the videos that are available, so it's almost like going, your own built-in Khan Academy, it's right in there. So the kids could, and it's specific to what they're learning, so they could use that at any time that they want. And then the options between remediation and enrichment are what excites me as well, because we're not just going to be teaching them right down the middle, we're going to be able to meet them wherever they are. If they need additional scaffolding, it's there. And if we can enrich it, which is, again, something that really kind of excites me, that's one of the things I really want to push here.
So at home, they could do much more work if they're interested in it.
Yeah,
as
they could do,
opposed to,
yes, because they want that, so.
Yeah, no, I like that.
I'm sure you did. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
This is not really, this is more like teaching specific, but it's just something, if a student says, I'm good without the hard copy, and they go all digital, is there ever a time where you say, you look at how they're doing and maybe they're not doing so well, and you say to them, no, we want you to take the hard copy to see if that would help you to have the book at home? It's a weird question, I know, but I was just wondering about it.
It's actually a good question, and it is something I think that's at the teacher's disposal as well as working with the student, because they know their students the best. And that's why I'm getting that additional set as well, so we have that flexibility that if needed, that we can provide them with that.
Okay.
And in the classroom, we want to have them available for them to use, because we don't want them, I think you mentioned, not being digital all the time. In the classroom, I don't want them to be all the time into the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really nice to have that option at home. It's nice to have that option if we need it in the classroom as well.
Okay. And then I really appreciate you looking out for the increased rigor. I mean, that we're talking about this on the Algebra 1 for the middle school, and I do want to revisit that. I know COVID messes up the numbers, but that's something that I am always interested in, and I think a lot of us, we want to make sure that the students are being appropriately challenged.
Right.
And the fact that it has the remediation built in excites me too, and I'm not even a mathematician. I'm happy for that, so thank you. Jordan, did you?
I just wanted to say quick, you answered my first question about access to the videos, because even with, there's so many other different platforms like Everyday Math, so you're saying it's right there, you don't have to go to Khan Academy, you don't have to go, it's literally, which is awesome. So if they forget how to do it for homework, they can hit it up at home and watch that. But then my other question was, you mentioned about 5 assessments. Is that per unit, or what is that breakdown?
Yeah, it is actually. And what they are is they're geared towards, again, and I mentioned enrichment, remediation, and then there's 3 for the middle, so it gives you options as well. So you can actually, do 3 options of the same test in the classroom. So it defeats that first math thing.
Just 2 quick things. Those assessments, do they, can we pull those into Linkit so that you can pull the data and actually group your kids based on need after each of those assessments? Is that something that that we can use with Linkit?
So I'm working on whether we can do it directly or not.
Okay.
At minimum, we can get results and send it to them, and then they can upload it.
Because that would be helpful, obviously, if we could get that data in real time and then be able to use that data, to move forward. And then just one more thank you, and I don't hand them out often, so, but you would also, I appreciated that you were trying to fit the textbook as a resource to support the curriculum as opposed to match the curriculum to fit a cookie cutter resource. I think that that's important, and I appreciate that the forethought in what they should be learning at what age and what's most beneficial to students, and then making the resource fit that curriculum and that progression, as opposed to, well, we'll just match whatever book. So again, I just wanted to thank you for that extra effort.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like that one can move forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the age of the textbooks as well.
Yeah.
It's definitely time to replace them.
Yes,
So
no problem.
they've served their purpose, I think.
Talking about payphones, maybe.
Although they're probably books I've used, so at least, they'd be more familiar to me now.
I wasn't I'm sorry, that when you were talking about how the textbooks are old, I was thinking, well, math doesn't really change, but I didn't think of the, like, word problems that would reference things that they would have no idea what you were talking about, so. I'm sorry, Dr. Bolton.
No, this is just a clarification of the process in terms of the change around curriculum. And so what I will do about a week prior to the board meeting, the voting board meeting, is to see whether you are comfortable with this progressing in 1 month and not coming back for conversation next month. So we have it built into the schedule that if we want to have more conversation around the math textbooks, we can do that. So we do have them available to you, both digitally and hard copy, if you'd like to take a look. I know some of you have already been peeking through them. So we'll reach out to you closer to the board meeting, and if everyone still seems to be comfortable like they are tonight, once you've dug into it a little further, we can go ahead and put those on for approval. If not, we can put them right back on the March curriculum committee to just answer 1 or 2 questions publicly if they come up. So we'll make that decision closer to the February board meeting.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, and did you also want to speak about the geometry as well?
I did it both all at the same.
Oh, was it all at the same time?
Yeah, I did it all at the same time. The only bonus that and I did mention that the geometry also adds is it takes the geometry sketchpad and infuses that into the curriculum as well. So that's a kind of a nice thing too, because we do use some tools that pull it in, but it's there already.
Great, thank you. Oh, wait, you're also the
I get
next
to talk
thing.
about more math.
Personal finance.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's it. Yep. So 2 years ago, through the curriculum renewal process, a suggestion was made that every student prior to leaving high school should take a financial literacy course. And having done mortgage and loans in another life, I saw people that were financially strapped, living in large houses, and I felt really bad for them. That's actually why I do what I do today, but I'll tell the story later. The board was in agreement when we put that suggestion out, so we went ahead and developed a personal finance honors course in addition to the currently offered full-year personal finance course that we have, and the financial foundations course that's offered through the business department. Creating the half-year honors course will provide our students with multiple options for developing the financial literacy prior to graduation. In your packet, you received a financial literacy options table, and in that table, it kind of outlines that we have the 2 half-year options and 1 honors course through the math department, 1 honors course through the math department and 1 through the business department, and then we have the full-year personal finance that's already available. Why that's important is, giving them the 3 options, is we can ensure that our students can satisfy what we're looking to have is the financial literacy piece before they ever leave high school, which is so important. And then they're going to be able to apply critical thinking skills to real-world financial situations. And I can't think of something that's more relevant than that. So, I mean, in a nutshell, I know it was received very well a couple of years ago when we talked about it, and it's done and ready to go. And we're excited about the personal finance honors piece of it because we also have added in additional where we're going to use Excel a lot more, as well as pulling in some algebraic concepts into the course.
Can you talk a little bit about the cost and why this course does not have much cost associated with it in terms of the proposal?
Or any?
Right.
Yes. Well, actually, our teachers, especially Cato Boyle has spearheaded it, but in terms of our teachers have done a fantastic job putting this course together over the years, and we do use software that's available already, and we don't have to do anything to update it as well, so that's kind of nice. So this course here is fully developed on our end. So
Chester, could we call up the financial literacy options so that the people in the crowd can see it? It's the second attachment on your board docs,
You got it.
board members, if you're looking at it. I know that it's up there. Two pieces. One, as Dr. Scheid said, this is going to connect to part of the graduation requirements in terms of one of our proposals is that personal finance become a requirement for all students prior to graduation, starting with the incoming 9th grade class for next year. And so one of the things to do that is you need to provide lots of options for kids, right? There's not then one course that fits every student that's going to graduate from Pennridge 4 years from now. And so these would be the three options. The business department already has a half-year course. The math department has a full year 1 credit course. And then there is the new honors development in terms of a half credit course that would be taken from the math department course and supplemented for the honors from that piece. This is, as you remember, or to remind you, this is one of the district goals in the current comprehensive plan. So when the comprehensive plan group, and Mr. Vogel referred to this, there was a community and board, and that comprehensive plan was written 3 years ago, and this was one of those goals that was established at that time. So we've been working on that since then, and so we developed some courses, but now we are making the recommendation that it be part of the requirement. So this is a pretty important document just to get a sense for the number of options that students will have. Lots of similarities in the courses, but not identical in terms of what the student needs and what they would choose from it.
Can I ask a quick question? What percentage, so we want to turn this into a requirement that everybody has to take it. What percentage of people are taking these courses today,
Well, right now,
of the students?
right now off the top of my head, it's something like 325 students, I think, that are in
Personal finance?
personal finance currently.
Okay.
So, I mean, if we're looking at a class of 600 per year, so we are going to increase that.
Yeah. No, I think it's an excellent. I think the requirement is, I think everybody should go through some sort of course like this, so it's great.
I am so very excited about this.
I'm excited too. I think it is, I'm glad that we can, I know the difficulty of making it a requirement. Years ago when we were talking about it was that students, if there's not an honors option, they're not going to want to take it. But now we're going to have the honors option. No offense, math people, but this, you can say this is math that you're going to see and use every day. So, you know, it's relevant, and it's what parents are asking for. You see it all the time out in the community. Why don't we teach students these kinds of things? So I am excited. Does anyone else have any? Go ahead.
I just also wanted to say thank you for putting this together. I think it's important to have these options to fit the needs of every kid so that everyone can get these skills when they leave here, because it's so important. And like Mrs. Cullen said, I mean, when they leave here, you always hear that in the community. How come they don't teach kids how to do this? And it's all in this, which I think is really important. And I've heard from so many people in industry and people who work in our local banks who are kind of, it's mind-boggling to them when they get kids who graduated and they come in and they have no idea what they're doing as far as school loans or mortgages or car loans or anything like that. And it's so important to know how to be able to do these things in life. So it's really important that this is here. And I know Mrs. Dolan is really going to appreciate it, because this was like her big pet peeve her entire time on the board. And so she'll be really excited to hear that it's finally happening. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe there won't be as much shock for them when they see the, you know the price of the college and what it's going to be. But when they actually can understand the commitment they're making, maybe we won't have as much of a problem with students being saddled with, debt that they didn't really understand was going to be coming their way. So I think, is that Bob? Is that your light on?
Yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. First of all, I really appreciate this. I think it's paramount that all students, male, female, understand the financial world and what goes on with it. One of my questions is, have you thought about putting a component in each one of these categories from the standpoint of starting a business? If you look at today's environment, you've got about 90% of the people that are going off of the unemployment laws are now starting their own business. I deal with that on a daily basis. One of the concerns I have is folks don't really understand financial analysis, business plan writing. I don't see any of that in here from the standpoint of giving a student the ability to say, well, you know, I want to start my own business. But I lose it in trying to find out any direction from that standpoint. So if I have someone that walks in my office and says, I want to start XYZ widget company, I always ask them, do you have a financial plan? Do you have a business plan? No, I don't. I always send them to the small business development centers, whether it's at Lehigh or Temple. Does anything look like, have you thought about that from a standpoint of an educational component to all three of these plans, where they would actually get involved with looking at developing a financial plan or a business plan?
We had not gone that far with it. In the full year course, in the personal finance for the, I don't think we'll get there for that. I'm very interested though in exploring that. And in the finance honors, I definitely think we could probably insert that.
Yeah.
But either way, what I'd like to do, we would need help on that. Because
I would be more than happy to help you out with that. And put you in the right connection with people.
that would be great, because developing an entrepreneurship unit would be.
That's paramount in
pretty
today's
great.
environment. Right.
And if not, we can also explore the idea of developing a half-year course.
I just wanted to add that we do have business courses that.
True, true, yeah.
Business.
Another man.
You can't have everything.
That would be a business.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll explore it in tandem with the business department.
I do like that idea, though, as he suggested, of trying to include it in this piece that's required, though, because there are a lot of kids who are going in that direction when they graduate. And so if we can try to build it in, as opposed to it being in those additional elective courses, and I know there is one, because I took it actually when I was in high school. But no, I think building it in would actually be beneficial. So I think that would be really neat if the two of you could work together to add that component in there. That would be really cool.
I'd actually like it even, like in both of our personal finance courses, because, I have a son that would have been in the full year course, and he's always coming up with one idea after another, so it'd be interesting for him to learn as well.
Question about resources. So there are no resources? Am I understanding that right? Or?
For the personal finance?
Yeah.
No, because everything that we use in the personal finance is either one, already been developed, or two, as we've gone through this process, there's several things of software that we use that's just on there and available to us.
Okay,
We have
like
this new cost.
budgeting software, that
Yeah.
type of thing. So do you all consider some of the folks that are popular in consumer press, like Dave Ramsey, and just different perspectives on things like not acquiring debt, and just some of the real Susie Orman's another one.
She actually shows videos of, I was in the class the one day with Dave Ramsey.
Oh.
Well, not with him.
Okay.
He was there.
Sure.
In spirit. And so we were watching the video of it, and it was really good, so.
Oh,
yes,
and
yes.
Was it with the gazelle?
But we do know that debt isn't bad if you're using it the right way.
Yes, leverage that in the
That's
proper
right.
way.
That's
Yes.
correct. Okay, and that's part of the process as well, I'm assuming.
But I'll be looking you up because we're going to need help.
Okay.
All right. Well, it sounds like that's got a lot of support, but again, is it again another thing that would go through the possibly 2 months, but if no problems? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vogel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr. Scheid, you're up again. For graduation requirements.
Good evening again. So you, what was that? I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Thank you. So we've had discussion about our chemistry classes in the labs, and we've just heard from Mr. Vogel, because we have been talking about personal finance for at least 3 years, so finally getting here, right? But the bigger conversation that we've been having for well over a year is, how do we create different options in the high school schedule so that students have more choice? And we did see one example of that with labs, but it's also in other places. So we have had conversations with the principals and teachers and guidance, and what can we do to open up the schedule for students? So that's really what I'm going to be talking about.
We also had some members of the community come up and talk about dual enrollment. We currently have a relationship with Bucks County Community College for dual enrollment. And this past semester, I think we had 34 students who participated, and in the spring, I think 25 students are enrolled, right? So we do have that advantage for students, but we want to broaden it. We would like to partner with Gwynedd Mercy University for their dual enrollment program, and they do things a little bit differently. So the current dual enrollment program for Bucks is our students leave the high school and they go across the street and they take classes there. So that is problematic with scheduling. I have my schedule here, I have to make it fit there, what options, and it has created opportunity, but it's still not as good as it can get. So with Gwynedd Mercy, the way their program works is students never leave Pennridge High School. So we take a look at some courses that Gwynedd Mercy, our courses that we offer here, or could be additional courses, I'll talk about that too. They take a look and they audit the course, and let's say it's a business course. We do have wonderful business courses here, so let's just say that, for example, because many of our other Bucks County school districts like Council Rock and Centennial, Neshaminy, they are working with Gwynedd Mercy, right? So it could be an honors accounting course, and Gwynedd Mercy would come and they would audit our curriculum. They would tell us what we needed to add to that curriculum. It's an honors course. There are students in the course, and we have a Pennridge teacher teaching the course. If the Pennridge teacher meets the criteria from the university, which really is a master's degree status, right, and they're already certified in business or math and such, and they agree that this instructor can teach that course, now we can offer dual enrollment right here. So theoretically, I'm in an accounting course, and it's an honors course, and I want to participate in dual enrollment. I want to have my college credit for that course. So Gwynedd Mercy offers a substantial tuition reduction. If you were not in dual enrollment and you're just entering undergrad at Gwynedd, it's over $600 for the course. $658. They are offering $400 for a 3-credit course for dual enrollment for our students, right? Substantially less money for the student. Now I can take that course, and I am Mr. Dyer and I'm teaching that course. Half the students want to take advantage of dual enrollment and get college credit, and the other half of the students do not, and that would be fine. Because the students who want the credit for dual enrollment and college credit and get this advantage, they'll pay the $400. The students who do not want that still experience that course and get honors credit, but Pennridge honors credit, but they're taking the same course. So it offers tremendous advantage to our students. So we would like to enter a contract with Gwynedd, and that's not to say that we wouldn't continue to work with Bucks County Community College. They are developing a contract because right now our students pay $165 per credit. So that a 3-credit course is $495. So that's more money, and I know they're working things out. So we really look forward to more conversations with Bucks and want to still partnership with them. Because again, this whole idea is to just open up opportunities for students. So let me move back to Gwynedd really quickly. You can take at least 12, up to 18 credits here at our high school and leave here, and if you graduate from Pennridge and you go to Gwynedd, now you don't have to, because many of these courses, right, as you move into undergrad work, you would make sure they were transferable. You would work with that institution. We do not want this to be a waste for any student. But if you chose to go to Gwynedd afterwards, they would then give you your last semester free of charge when you're ready to graduate. So there's a lot of perks with Gwinnett particularly that we really want to offer to our students, as well as continue our relationship with Bucks. So there'd be no scheduling issues. Our students would be right here. They'd have their own teachers teaching the class, so it gives you that level of comfort. So we see tremendous advantage in working with them. I've spoke to Council Rock, folks at Council Rock. They've been doing this for a while. They have a wonderful relationship with Gwinnett. Neshaminy also does that. There are a number of school districts who offer this, and we're excited about the opportunity with your approval to offer for our students. I do want to talk about one other thing, the future teachers. So I talked a little bit about business, and Gwinnett has been offering a lot of business courses to other school districts. You're not limited to business, as this is just something that they've established. What we're really interested in is growing our pathways at the high school. Right now we have arts and communication. I know the science department, they're really excited about developing a pathway. But everyone knows, or most people know, that the enrollment for future educators, future teachers in colleges and universities, it's decreasing, and it's alarming. But we would like to develop teachers here at Pennridge and have a future teachers pathway, so to speak. We currently have a future teachers club. So I met with Mrs. Nash, she's one of the teachers who work with the students in that club, and we would love to develop a pathway where we would give our own students the opportunity to have experiences at the elementary level, have experience at the middle level, and even when you're a senior, you could even have some at a freshman level. But we're excited about that. So when I spoke to Gwinnett about it, they have 2 courses that they could offer our students here. So 2, it's their foundation courses, and they would be able to take them here and get 6 credits before they leave, just in that field. Then I was talking to Mrs. Nash, and we could also offer psych, because that would be a class that you would take as a future teacher too. So we can think more about it, but we're excited about that. They do have the opportunity to work with us in that regard as well. So I don't want to go too far on that without asking if you had any questions that I can clarify just about the dual enrollment.
I remember when we talked with Bucks, they were able to say, we know for sure these schools will take our credits. Did Gwinnett do that for you?
They will do that for us.
Okay.
They will tell us which courses, which schools accept which courses. And then, of course, I'm sure there will be other universities or colleges that aren't on that list that we could find out for students. I think we definitely advocate for our kids and make sure that where they think they're going to go, right, that those courses are accepted.
So if we partner with multiple colleges, just playing this out, we have a teacher who's certified to teach psychology and give college credit for it. Do those kids in that class get college credit? Do they get to choose, hey, I want my college, because you said the fees are different, and I know that we're still in negotiations with Bucks County Community College, but how does that work in that specific situation? Does the kid get the credits, for either one, whichever one they choose? There's a fee involved, so do they say, well, I want to pay this fee and get my credits at Bucks, or this fee and get my credits at Gwinnett Mercy, if that class is a class that is approved for both?
We haven't gotten all that far yet, but I don't see it that way. I would think that we would have courses that you would get credit from Gwinnett. You'd have courses that you would get credit from Bucks County Community College. I don't know if how we would work that out. I'm sure there may be a way. In my mind, I'd love to work with both. We would love to work with both, right? And there's going to be courses that Gwinnett they're going to offer that perhaps Bucks isn't going to, so that we would be able to do it that way. I think it would get really complicated in terms of tuition,
right, that's
curriculum,
the piece. Which one gets the money?
Right? I think that would be really complicated. I think we would definitely want to simplify that.
And then I think the other complication to this, I think what was mentioned in the past when we've had this conversation, is the textbook piece, because all of the kids would need the same textbook. And if it's a college course, then it has to be their textbook, which is their cost, which is, you know, rotated every couple years, as opposed to us using our own textbook. And so the kids, you know, so there's that cost factor, and so some of the kids would be choosing not to get college credit, I don't know how many, and some would be choosing to get the college credit, and you'd have to work on doing that with that same book. So I think if we have to choose an either or, I guess, I feel like we need to explore this with as many of the schools as possible, because we need to see who's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck as far as the textbooks are concerned, as far as the tuition costs are concerned, because if those credits can really transfer to any of them, our smartest option would be to make the most cost-effective deal, and then knowing that those would transfer to any of those different schools wherever they want to go. So, you know, because I don't know how you would do it with multiple colleges, because you'd still have to choose, well, we're giving the money to this college for this class, because that's the deal we have with this specific class, as opposed to, you know, just where you would get credit for it, which I think are two different things, right?
Well, yes, I mean, I think that wherever it is you want to pay, we don't pay any of the tuition, these are kids, the students pay the tuition, so, I mean, that would be up to them. But in terms of the textbooks, I did have some conversation about textbooks. Some of the courses are just open resources, some of the courses, they want a particular textbook. I spoke to other school districts. The way one school district is handling it is they went through the audit first, they chose a class that they wanted to start with, and they decided on the textbook that the university was using, so everybody used the same textbook. So there's ways, you know, around that. I'm not saying any of it is simple, I'm just saying it's exciting and that it's available to our students.
How does this compete with or complement the AP program?
So we're talking about college credits that are guaranteed up front. And AP courses, some schools will take those courses as credit and some schools won't. So, you know, we're talking to a student today who's going to Princeton, and he knows his AP Psych isn't going to Princeton. He's not going to get credit there, so it's not a guarantee. And the other thing is the same student who may not take that AP exam, but if he could get credit for taking that course, he would. Some students don't take the AP exam because they know where they're going and they know that it isn't going to transfer.
Can I ask, so we would have the option of doing, a student could do Bucks or Gwinnett potentially?
Potentially.
Okay, because Bucks, you have to go across the street to Bucks, right?
Well, now you do. So they're working, they understand what other schools are doing. So they're working on a plan. And I understand that I will get some information maybe as early as next week. We want to have a plan similar to the one Gwinnett is offering, because there's so many scheduling complications. So they are working on it.
Students who are at Bucks now, however many that is, and that's working for them, could they still do that if we partnered with Gwinnett?
Could they still have dual enrollment, go across the street? Yeah.
Okay.
I can't see taking that away from anybody.
And there's also a virtual and hybrid option, so that kind of helps too, because some of them who don't want to go there can do it that way. I guess two things about dual enrollment that I just wanted to point out for people who aren't, you know, haven't been around for this conversation over the past couple of years. I think two of the problems that we need to fix for dual enrollment and what two of our commenters were alluding to is, you know, we kind of put in requirements. There were requirements that were added back in, I think, 2006 that's really restricted kids from being able to take dual enrollment, and we really need to lift those. One is that our kids are not allowed to take core courses at any of the colleges for dual enrollment. So that limits, when you look at, and we'll get to that slide later where it talks about what our requirements are as far as 4 English courses, 3 math, you know, they are required to take those courses here, and they're not allowed to take those classes at the college. And I don't know, I think we need to stop restricting kids and allow kids and families to decide where it's best for them to be able to get those courses, because if they can take that course at a community college or through some other dual enrollment option instead, we shouldn't be restricting them from doing that. they should be able to do that. And the other piece that's restricting them is that they can't take a similar course. Well, we offer political science. Bucks County Community College offers political science. Taking political science here is not similar to taking political science at Bucks County Community College. One you get college credit for, the other one you don't. Some kids are good at AP tests, and some kids aren't. I think that we need to remove the restrictions and let kids and families decide what's best for them and their education and the direction they're going. And it's also created more recent issues when you talk about our cyber program, because we pay for our kids to take a cyber course. So let's say we have a kid who's deciding they're going to do cyber in high school. Those kids, we're paying for their cyber courses through Edgenuity or whomever, and we're telling them that they can't go to the community college and where they pay to take that same course, because we'd rather us pay for it here for them to take it in a virtual capacity, and maybe it would be better for them to take it there. So again, even from a financial standpoint, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think it would be really helpful for us to change and allow the kids to be able to have more flexibility. We had kids back then who were graduating, as Mrs. Hill pointed out, with their associate's degree and their high school diploma at the same time, and they had that head start going into their future plans. So I think we really need to get back and allow kids to do that.
To me, it seems like this is something that might naturally start occurring because of a different arrangement. That if Bucks Gwinnett definitely does it. Bucks, you said, is going to start doing it the way other schools do. So that could be something that just sort of evolves on its own to make it easier. We can work those things out with them to allow for our students to take more courses, maybe.
Yes, I mean, that really is the solution, because you are taking courses that are running here.
Right, but
you're getting college credit for it.
But
So
if
you
they-
really get the best of both
But if they choose to take, but if they have both options, they should be able to take both options. That may not work into their schedule. It may be better for them to take the course.
That's what we're saying, though, is that this will all start working, as we work through it. I see it, that if the colleges, I think that this is something that it's definitely something that we want to look toward, is to making it more possible for them to take more courses. But I don't know, having the conversation right now in depth is something that's productive, since we don't have all the information, and we might be talking about problems that won't exist, perhaps, if we can just get that information from them.
Just to be clear, this is specifically in policy, so we would have to actually remove these things from our current policy to allow ourselves to do that.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just saying, to the extent that we want to go into in depth in the conversation here with this proposal.
Okay.
All right.
So, what we also will be talking about, which we already did talk about, so this will make more sense to you, is minimizing forced study halls. We're going to be looking at 10th grade health and phys ed and the chemistry labs once again. We already talked about personal finance, adding that as graduation requirement for our future 9th graders next year and beyond. I do want to end this presentation with a review of Act 158, especially for new board members, just going over the new graduation requirements, because they have changed, and that will force us to move to policy, because we're going to have to make some changes. So what we are recommending is, we're talking about aquatics. Right now in 10th grade, aquatics is required. It's required as 0.25 of the semester health and PE class. So every 10th grader has to take aquatics at the moment. We are recommending that we continue to have water safety and aquatics type courses, which our health and PE teachers have been working on, but not make it mandatory. Ever since I have been here, it has been one letter after the next. Kids coming to me and saying they don't want to take aquatics. It's not that they don't want to be healthy and such. They do not want to go into the pool in the middle of the day and have to change and all things like that. There are 2 surveys done, and it is a significant number of students who are asking, please do not make this a requirement. So we are asking to eliminate it as a requirement, and I'll talk more about that.
Is it okay if we ask some questions in the middle of this?
Well,
Just-
sure.
So they're still gonna do the second grade aquatics, I think it's second grade, or I forgot what my kid, fourth. We don't do that?
That's offered through the Y.
Yeah.
It's still through the
It's
Y?
offered through the Y. The Y provides that for our community.
My mistake. I just remember my kids going through it, so.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a couple years ago, was it while you were here,
Yes,
right?
it was
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
my first or second year.
Yeah.
The safety part of swimming, I think, is still something that's a responsibility, and I know by 10th grade, they're probably capable of that, but, okay, so that's a different issue.
Well, one quick comment on aquatics. In the 40 years that I've been in economic development, I have not had one company on a job interview ask if someone knew how to swim. 80,000 jobs created in Bucks County, not one company has ever asked, do you know how to swim as a requirement for hiring? Something to put in the back of your head when we think about aquatics and the need to have that as a requirement.
Right, as a standalone required course, I can see the value of maybe inserting it into other PE, maybe, I don't, but it has been a bone of contention for years and years, and it's the same complaints every year. And I think that they're valid complaints personally.
Why did we do it, or why was it in there
great question.
from many years ago?
Because we have the pool.
We used
To
to do
justify
it
the
for the
use of
younger
the
kids,
pool?
and I get it
Justify
for the
the-
younger kids. What?
Because, go ahead.
As I've spoken to people who have been around for the history, the requirement came at the same time of the construction of the pool. So I believe they were connected
Getting there.
conversations around, we're going to have a pool, let's make sure we utilize it, and our pool is utilized.
That's not a good reason.
Heavy. Well, but I think that's the answer to the question
Okay.
in speaking to people who were here when that conversation happened.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're also looking to decrease our credit requirement in health and PE from 2 credits to 1.5. And that really was a serious look at how we could add the semester course of personal finance. So when you take, if you want to add something, you have to take something out. And that is where, and we'll explain what that looks like. And we already talked about eliminating double lab periods, and I will show you on the next slide, I think it is, how we did that with physics, and there was really no impact on grades. But I'll show you that. We already talked about required personal finance credit, and then, exciting, we have a STEAM requirement that we want to show you. So these are just numbers to show you how many students. So if you look at 10th grade, with that aquatics and the health part, the 2 quarter credit courses, we have about 400 students taking 4 study halls, basically because of that, because they are not getting them in the same semester. So they're having 3 classes on and then 3 study halls, and then the next semester they do the same thing. And then in 11th grade, that is really because there's 500 kids out of 600 and some who have that study hall because of the double chem lab period. So we just really wanted to show you what those numbers look like.
Mathematically, it means that over 50% of our students are forced into study hall in both 10th and 11th. So, we have 80% of them in 11th alone, but more than 50% of our students are forced, because of the way we schedule and what our requirements are, into study halls in both 10th and 11th grade. Generally, it is 4 or 5 days of the 6-day cycle that they're sitting in a study hall for that period.
Aren't there electives that would just be 3 days a week or 2 days a week? And do we have enough electives that people could supplement so they wouldn't have a study hall if they didn't want it?
There are very few that are 3 days a week and only for a semester, which would be a 0.25 credit. The schedule will work in health and PE if the courses dovetail perfectly, but they can't and they don't based on what other students want. The flexibility of 0.5 courses really expands in 11th grade, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about in terms of health and PE. Right now, students take 1 credit in 9th grade. They take a half credit in 10th grade that is often broken up. It's generally not a half credit. It's generally a 0.25 and a 0.25. And then they're asked to find 2 0.25 courses somewhere in 11th and or 12th grade to fill out 2 credits, which means they're creating study halls again by taking the 0.25s because there's nothing behind them. We're really asking the health and PE department to look at how can they take their most popular courses and form some .5 options, because in 11th and 12th grade, there are an awful lot of .5 electives in lots of different departments, whether it be English, social studies. A lot of the .5s open up in 11th and 12th grade as students have more choice in terms of what they want to take. And so we're trying to find as many things as we can. That's why you see personal finance as a .5. You'll see the health and PE is now a forced .5. It's not 2.25s. So you're required to have together, because if you want to take that in 10th grade, we're going to try to schedule them so they're back to back, so you don't have to take a study hall if you don't want to. That's kind of the walking through this. Senior year, I mean, obviously we have 2/3 of our students who are taking study halls. Generally, your schedule opens up your senior year, and so there are more students who are either leaving early or coming in late or doing internships or working. And so a lot of that is productive study hall time, that they're doing something else during that. And we think that that's an appropriate thing for seniors as they start looking at, are there other opportunities, are there internships, are there co-op programs that they could be doing where they would need a block of time, where they might need 2 periods to be able to leave to be able to go and work for a couple hours. Those are the types of things we're talking about as we think about student choice.
So we saw,
Dr. Dormer talked about the lab techniques course, and we really wanted to talk about chemistry labs would still be a part of the curriculum. We do know how passionate our science teachers are, and that would be really hard for them to lose that lab. I talk to teachers across the board all the time. Math would love a lab, the English department would love a writing lab. I mean, everybody's vying for that extra time. So we do know how difficult a decision that is. We did want to show you this though. So when physics, the double lab period in physics at the end of 2017, when that was removed, the data, as you can see, indicates that the removal of the second lab period didn't negatively influence the grades the following 2 years. And as a matter of fact, in academic, they went up. So we didn't see any impact in how students performed when we went from the double physics lab to the single lab period.
And I just want to be clear that we're speaking to the curriculum. So we're speaking to what the students learned in physics was a similar experience. Obviously, when you take away a 90-minute lab period, there were other things that you don't measure simply by a grade. So I don't want this slide to come across as we're saying that there isn't something you're giving up when you make the recommendation to give lab periods, right? The physics teachers would have been in that same boat. What we're saying is that curriculum question about what has to change in the curriculum, that's not as significant from a standpoint of what the students are learning about chemistry, or learning in this case about physics. That their grades, that the curriculum was probably identical, it was clearly very similar, and their grades were the same, and actually in academic they went up from that standpoint in terms of a 2-year study of students both pre and post.
How do you measure what the percentages mean?
We did A's and B's. Students who got A's and B's in either honors physics or in academic physics over a 2-year period. So in the school years that ended in 2016 and 2017, so that's 2 different graduating classes, those honors students, 91.5% of them got A's and B's. The following 2 years when there were no labs, 90% of them got A's and B's. So we were just looking at final grades, and that's one of the ways that we measure our curriculum in terms of how are the students doing and what we're putting in front of them.
So this is talking about eliminating the required course, but I'll talk about what would happen in place of that. So current classes here, the current students who are at the high school and continuing forward. So if you look at the class of 2026, which are the incoming freshmen, there's a 9th grade wellness class. So it's health and PE, it's 1 credit, it's all year long. They have that now, and that will continue. And then I think Dr. Bolton really just explained it. In 10th grade, there are 2 quarters. They give them a semester, and then the current students have to find 2 more quarter credits to complete their 2 credits of health and PE before they graduate, because it's currently a graduation requirement for 2. We're recommending that we continue 9th grade wellness A, for health and PE for the full credit for the year, and then the health and PE teachers create the half a credit, the semester course, instead of the 2 quarter credits. Then students can choose to take additional elective classes beyond the required 1.5 graduation requirement. So currently it's 2 credits. We're making the recommendation for 1.5.
And theoretically, they could be finished that in their credit requirements by sophomore year, and then they could take whichever electives they so choose. Again, this is really about expanding student choice.
And just a quick question about that. So when you say we would be requiring 1.5, the state only requires 1.
Correct.
And so this causes a lot of problems, particularly for kids at the technical school who lose a lot of their time learning in their program because they're required to take this phys ed piece. It limits the number of electives because they're already taking all of their electives there, and it really causes it limits choice for kids here for one extra half of a health class. I feel like we dictate to kids what they take up through middle school. High school is when they are supposed to be able to choose what courses best fit their education and their path moving forward. And we talk about pathways as if we really want to prioritize students and families getting to choose what's best for them. If we really believe that, then we should not be requiring this extra half credit for this wellness. We should go to the 1 credit that is required by the state. And if they choose to take that extra half a course, they can. Obviously, we think there's value in all of our courses, or we wouldn't have had them proposed and voted on and approved. So for us to decide that this class is more important for kids, I don't think that we should be acting like big government and telling families and kids what's best for them. I think we're preparing them to be adults, and they should be able to choose what courses best fit their paths. And that's for this course, as well as, you said that the class was moved to be able to create the finance piece, but that half a credit of the finance class that they're taking can fit within the 3 credits they're already required to take for math. So we don't really need to move anything from here. They have 3 credit requirement for math. The half credit fits beautifully within there, and then they have 2.5 additional credits they have to take. This should just be we should not be requiring this and let them take an elective instead. And then the same thing for the wellness piece. We're limiting it again because we're moving from saying you can choose any humanities course to now you can only choose a social studies course. And it's an additional social studies course on top of what the state is requiring. So again, that's another whole credit that we can let parents and kids decide what's best for them. Maybe an extra social studies class is good for some kids, but maybe it's not best for other kids. Maybe kids who are going into the science field would benefit more from an additional science course. Maybe kids who are going into the math field would benefit from an additional math course. But we shouldn't be telling them above and beyond the state requirements what we think is best for them to take. We should let them choose and not have the additional 1.5 pigeonholed credits telling them we think these things are far more important than anything they would choose for their own pathways.
So when you're talking about graduation requirements at any public high school, there's conversations, right? And what you value and what you really think a student who graduates from your high school should leave with, should know and be able to do. And you're right, that is not a scheduling issue. That's a value point. What do we think students who come through the high school, what do we think is in their best interest, especially with the pandemic, especially with every conversation that we've had about mental health and kids taking care of each other? We thought long and hard about that. We know that the state only requires 1 credit. And the reason why the state requires 1 credit is because it's all about the standards. And if you could create a 1 credit course and cover all the standards, then so be it. It becomes a value, right? What do you think is most important? And that's where these conversations, it was hard to look at 2 credits of health and PE and say, wow, it's going to be hard to even decrease that, especially with the mental health piece, and taking good care of yourself. So that really wasn't a scheduling. That was not about scheduling. That was about conversations on what we think our students is in their best interest.
And I agree it's a value conversation, but I don't think we should be pushing our values on families and kids. I think we should let them choose what their values are and what best fits their education for the future and choose their own courses. We do that for them kindergarten through 8th grade. So 9th through 12th grade, when we're preparing them to be adults, they should be able to choose whether or not that extra half credit of health benefits them more than this science course that's a half credit that they could take instead, or whether or not they need that extra social studies as opposed to something else. These are their choices that they should be making for their future.
Quick question. How does it affect if we would go to the 1.5 and then making the aquatics an elective and not required? Does this mess with jobs? Does this mess with like a position being eliminated because it's not required, or are we just going to fill it with electives? Like, does that affect anything that way?
So it could over time, because what we're recommending is the change of 2.0 to 1.5 for the incoming class. So you still have everybody here at the high school, right, who need the 2 credits. So it really depends, and it depends, I think, to Mrs. Bascon's point on what do students want to take. I mean, you can still take plenty of electives, even if you only have 1.5 graduation requirement. That doesn't limit me. I have electives. I can take a lot more classes. They offer, we have a really nice list of health and PE classes for students. And they could take as many as that they fit in their schedule.
For like the teachers too, like what for theirs, you're saying possibly over time it could, right, we might have less teachers for that area. Okay,
Well, couldn't, right. Well, yep, that's a possibility. It's Dr. Bolton.
It definitely is a possibility. But the other piece to think about is these recommendations are made to increase the number of credits students can take, which means overall from a staffing standpoint, if students fill their schedules and not take study halls, that's going to require more staff. It may not be in health and PE, because that's determined by what the students choose. Right? We might increase in business because more students are taking personal finance or the entrepreneurship that Mr. McCormick's going to teach for us. Mr. Cormack's going to teach for us. But whatever that looks like. But so it is unlikely to have an impact on staffing overall, because overall I think we're going to increase the number of courses students are taking. But it could very well in individual departments, depending on what the enrollment is. Yes, that could happen. That would be phased in because it is something that would not be for the students currently sitting in the high school. It would be for the class of 2026 as they're coming in.
It's just hard. I feel like over the years I hear what, Megan, what you're saying, like having them have the choice. To me, it almost seems like a theme with the labs and with phys ed and wellness, that it's just like over time it seems like less and less and less and less. And you mentioned it being a value, and in today's world, so many kids are playing video games, not outside playing. Any more physical activity is not as much as it used to be. So it's difficult for me to make that decision. I understand what you're saying, like don't make it a requirement so those kids that want to take it will take it. But just kind of missing those, values and those things on how to take care of yourself and what. So that's just where I'm at.
I think to the same, but going from the 2 to the 1.5, at first, I have to say I was a little, should we be really reducing their physical activity in today's world? But I do see opportunity with the different electives, the gym electives. So, be more like college where you could take all sorts of things that would count for your PE credits, and maybe they would be inspired to take more than the required amount. I would like to see an effort, though, to encourage them in that direction, promote it. Like we promote STEAM and STEM, and those things are wonderful, but like you just said, being mentally well and physically well is very important, too. And actually, being physically well helps you to be academically successful, too. So I was at first uncomfortable with it, but maybe if there would be the understanding that you're not just going to drop it and say, well, we're just dropping it. If it's going to be no longer a requirement, but we really encourage you to take those, that would be maybe a different story.
And we've had those conversations because I think the health and PE department have given a lot of thought about expanding the courses. They have done that over the past few years with umpiring, things that kids benefit from. And when they're out there, and I love the point that Mrs. Cullen made, when you're in college, I'm going to take tennis, or just things that you want to do, that we do encourage kids to do that, right? There are a lot of different options, and we talked to the department about creating more. This isn't about we don't think that you should be doing that. We're saying we're going to try to make your experience at Pennridge High School, well-rounded to the best degree that we can. And we think personal finance really matters. And we care about your health too. And we want you to have it all. We also know that you should have choices. When you're junior and senior, you can have as many of those electives as fit in your schedule.
So, just to be clear, this isn't a phys ed half credit, this is a wellness, this is a health class that they're taking. We're not saying that they're taking an extra phys ed class. This extra half credit that's built in is a health course. It's not a phys ed course.
It's health PE, it's a combination course.
But you said you took away the phys ed piece, the fitness piece, but left the health class.
No, health and
Wellness
PE combined.
Combined PEs.
Yeah, they're combined.
Okay, so kids who are in varsity sports, kids who are doing all of these other things, you know, who would benefit more from a different academic course don't have that choice. Kids who are at the tech school who are already using all of their electives don't have that choice. And then they're losing time that they can be working on learning their skills at tech because they're taking the phys ed course. It's not a one-size-fits-all, that's the problem. And we're trying to make it a one-size-fits-all. And it's kind of like we're talking outside of both sides of our mouth because we're saying we want to move towards pathways, but then we're saying, but we know best, so we're going to make sure everybody has a one-size-fits-all and takes these specific courses. So, you know.
I would be open to, we've talked about it before, kids who are doing varsity, or not even varsity, JV, if you're doing a sport, then to me, I think there are some schools that allow students to have PE credit for sports. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I thought that I had heard that somewhere along the line. I guess what I would be interested in is seeing how we compare to other, to other schools. What's the level of choice that other high schools have, in their school districts, and see if there's more flexibility and how that works out for them. But it's a big thing
Yeah,
for
just
tonight. But
so you're saying go to 1 credit, like Megan, you're saying go to 1. We're saying the proposal now is 2 to 1.5. Is it correct?
Right, I'm saying we should only require what the state has, which is 1. Is that?
Okay, so that's the debate is, you're saying 1 minimum, give them more choice. You're saying 2 to 1.5 to give them more choice also because you're going to make it easier for scheduling. That's a separate issue.
And just to be clear, PDE will not allow you to give credit to kids who have varsity sports, so
Well,
we
we
don't
should
have
have-
that option, so.
that
that's
should
why
be
I'm-
something that we go to advocacy day for.
Well,
I think
right.
that would be a valuable thing to advocate
If we
for.
make it a choice, then we solve that problem, because then those kids don't need to make that choice.
Right, because you have to remember, this is about standards. When you're talking about the curriculum and required courses, this is the state and standards. That's why that's not allowed. Okay. We talked about the personal finance, so I don't need to go through that. All right, so PD credit requirements, and they do only require one credit of health and PE. 4 English, 3 math, 3 science, 3 social studies, 2 arts or humanities, or both. There's lots of flexibility in that, with 5 electives. So the state only requires 21 credits. And I will note, they do that for a reason. They do that because they have looked at their standards and they say that's how many credits it would take for you to cover the standards. That's what they're thinking. Now, of course, there's so much flexibility with that, and different districts figure this out in different ways because it's what they value. So our current credit requirements, we have 4 English, 3 math. Social studies says 3, but it's actually 4. If you read that, you have to take 4 social studies, 1 as an elective, so you'd actually have to pass this course. 3 science, and then we have wellness, we just talked about that. 2 credits, a half a credit of creative and performing arts, and humanities elective, 1.5, with 7 electives. So that's 24 credits, and we're not changing that, or not making a recommendation to change the 24. This is how we've structured it. So there's still 4 credits of English. Then, and this was the brainchild of Dr. Bolton, the STEAM credits are combined. So now this is where some flexibility comes in. So you have 3 credits of science, you can have 3, and you have to have 3 credits of mathematics. Then, if you're a math person, you can take another math through that STEAM credit, or another science, or you can take creative arts, and or technology, using that 1 extra credit of the 7 for STEAM. I'll let you digest that, see if you have any questions there. You'll see how it works out. Because social studies is 4 now, and it would continue to be 4, and that really is a value system. That is conversation that we have had about. We are a public school in the United States of America. We should be teaching social studies. We should be celebrating our great country and citizenship and learning about the world and our place in it. So that was a conscious decision to keep 4 credits of social studies. And to be able to articulate and communicate in the world for English, to be able to speak and read, to be able to write, to communicate. So they were values. And then wellness, we said 1.5, and we value that as well. And then here are the electives, with 1 caveat, with the personal finance as a mandatory, a required semester course. Otherwise, everything in between, where you see with world languages and business, continued health and PE, arts, music, tech, all of those classes, they would be the electives for students still. And again, the only thing that we have made the requirement is personal finance. And we still have 24 credit requirement.
So, I guess the only thing, I've already pretty much commented on the other changes, and again, the extra social studies may be of value to some people. It may not be the best value to some of the other kids. Maybe they're an art major, maybe they have the opportunity to take band or chorus and they wouldn't have been able to do that, you know, if they had to take that course. The other thing I wanted to just mention is with us requiring 24 credits instead of the 21, again, that's another situation where we're basically telling them they need to take, that's not what the state requires. The state requires 21. I think we're trying to put everyone in a box. Some kids work. Some kids have other responsibilities outside of school. Some are very involved in athletics. Some are very involved in the arts, in music, and have these additional responsibilities outside of school. Some may want to take some difficult courses but can't handle taking a full schedule of them and would prefer to take 1 less course but take really rigorous courses, so that way they can concentrate on those courses and not be overwhelmed by the number of courses they have to take at once. It's not a one-size-fits-all. They can take as many credits as they want, but why are we requiring it and forcing kids into a box instead of letting kids and families decide what makes sense for them and gives them the best opportunities for them to be successful? So that's another way. I think what we should do is go back to the slide where it says PDE requires, and that should be our new graduation requirements.
Just one piece of clarification from a math standpoint. Students currently can fit, this is without dual enrollment and some other creative options, can currently fit 7 credits per year. That's assuming no forced study halls in terms of them being able to get that, which means there are 28 slots for students. So if you think about if you're just taking 7 credits a day, you could graduate with 28 credits. And so as we're requiring 24, that would alleviate at least half of your senior year, actually more. 4 of your 7 credits your senior year would be flexible under the current credit requirements.
Right, I think he said that technically they could finish in 3 years if they took all of them at once. I think, again, we should be giving kids that flexibility, and some of them may be leaving early because they have work opportunities, especially kids who are in the technical field, and they can get that real life experience. I think that we're trying to suggest that for everyone, what's better is those extra 3 credits as opposed to the life experiences that they may be getting outside of this that don't give them that credit, or the additional responsibilities they have on their plates. Or again, they may take easier courses because they have to get that many credits as opposed to taking less courses that are more rigorous so that they can handle them all at once. Again, I think it's best for parents and students who are now becoming adults and learning to make their own decisions and going to college and choosing a career. I think that we should let them make these choices for themselves.
Well, what's the history behind the 24 credits? And was the Pennsylvania requirement, was it reduced at one point? And what are the other comparable schools are they requiring as well?
Yeah, to remember, I don't know about in terms of at Pennridge, because there was a time where, as Ms. Hill mentioned, that some of the forced study halls were taken out of the graduation requirements, which is why students had fewer than 24. That was put back prior to me getting here, so I don't know the history of it going up and down in terms of that piece. The 21 credits, in most schools, 6 to 8 credits a year is normal. And so if you're only doing 6 credits a year, you're only looking at 24, and so that's part of it. And the state is setting bare minimums for every student across the state of Pennsylvania. And so I'm not sure that's our target, right? And I wouldn't be comfortable, which is why it's not our recommendation, that our target is not the bare minimum that a student in the state of Pennsylvania can take. In our current system, a student could, if we allow them to double up, because it does currently say you have to take 4 years of English and 4 years of social studies, and you have to take 1 per year, so we couldn't get them done in 3 years, but we could if we went to 21 credits and allowed them to double up in English and social studies. Again, it's not our recommendation. The vast majority of school districts are in the same place where we are, that they basically look at 3.5 years of required work, and the other half year is that flexibility for students who either struggle, because we have some students who we pull across the finish line with 24 credits, right? That we really, they work hard and we work hard to get them there. We have other students who are graduating with 27 to 30 credits because they're doing dual enrollment and they're filling their schedules, and it's very different student to student. The average is in the low 26s. I think if you did the average of the last 2 graduating classes, I think it's like 26.2 credits that students are graduating with. So most students are in that 25.5 to 26.5 credit range in terms of what they're graduating with, and that's right now where we're really forcing them to not be able to get to 28 in terms of that piece. So that's really the history around it. Now the humanities and education being steeped in humanities, and the interaction with literature and history being that critical thinking, and it being so varied, as opposed to math and science, and this hurts me as a math teacher to say, but to talk about that breadth, I think there are lots of systems that have that humanities requirement in terms of English and social studies that we do think is important in terms of, if you think about the skills we want students to graduate with, we think they are best represented in English and social studies. And it doesn't mean that's exactly what every kid wants to take, but in terms of what we set as priorities for them, and that's one of the reasons the state has done that with English, right? They've separated English for some reason. And I think that's part of that in terms of that conversation that we have. We do think that with some of the changes we've made, we've provided lots of extra flexibility. It's not as flexible as it could be, and I understand that, in terms of what Mrs. Baines-Clemens would be advocating for. But we do think it has increased the flexibility for students to have lots more choices, especially as they get into their junior and senior years, to do what they think is best for them in terms of their schedule.
Well, we're being less flexible in one area when we take a humanities course where you have a much more broad range of courses and physically make it have to be a social studies course. The only other thing I just wanted to share is that because of the dual enrollment requirements, which I know people don't want to talk about tonight, that's fine, but because kids can't get credit for a lot of the dual enrollment classes that they want to take, they take those above and beyond their requirements here and don't get credit for them, and because they're not getting credit for them, that's again more work on top of the work that they already have, and again limiting, requiring these additional credits may have hindered that opportunity for them, because now they have that additional requirement on top of it where they could again take those classes at Bucks instead.
I would have to agree that I don't necessarily want to lower our credit requirements. There are actually schools, I can attest to one personally, that the credit requirement is higher than ours to graduate, which was a little bit shocking. It's something we weren't expecting, but and believe me, I often wonder why we have to take certain courses. I would have my preferences. I would love to see economics be more, something that we emphasize here. But I don't really want to go down the path of lowering from 24 to 21, at least not at this time, unless I heard something different from others.
So basically, you're trying to create more opportunities by change. So we kind of look bad when we get rid of one of the lab periods, but at the same point, this may give people an opportunity to take an extra course or 2 courses and broaden the experience they can have here. So
right.
It's a trade-off that we have to decide. That's good.
It is a trade-off. It isn't perfect.
Yeah. No,
It
I
isn't
understand.
perfect, but it would give students opportunities to take 2 more semester courses.
Yeah. That's, at least I understand that.
Okay, thank you. So I will go over these regulations. I just want everyone to understand how the state changed graduation requirements as it relates to Keystone exams, because there's been an ebb and flow to state testing where it was a priority, and then for some districts it wasn't a priority, and the state didn't make it a requirement, and now it is a requirement. So we're back where it's a requirement. So we are working really hard to help our students in every which way we can to be successful. But the state also understands that some students won't be. So they have created alternate pathways to graduation.
Can you get that for me, please?
Thanks.
Board members,
This link here.
board members, it is the link on the Act 158 slide. It's in your presentation if you prefer to follow along there.
So we just put it as. Okay, that's right. So we're going to talk about pathways. And in terms of choice, that's what the state said. They know some students will not pass these exams, and they're going to make it a graduation requirement. How can they help? They created other pathways. So the easiest way to get to graduation requirement is to be proficient on the Keystone exam. So if you take all 3 and you pass it, you have to pass the course, you have to pass the exam. You're done. You met the requirement by the state. Our issue now is we've had, and we're not unlike other districts, we have had so many students opt out of the exam. So if we don't have the students here, right, they're not taking the exam. And part of the reason why you want them to take the exam is so that we can see if our curriculum is in the right place, so these students are proficient and or advanced on the exam. So we are doing everything we can. Mrs. Clemmer is working with us, our data specialist, and she is pulling every student's score over time to see what is the best pathway for every student. Because we know it isn't going to be the same for everybody. But again, we really are hoping that more students take the exam. We know that everyone has, you have a religious right to be exempt from the exam. But if we have students taking the exam, that will give us an indication of the curriculum that we've created. So if you do not pass all 3, pathway 2 is based on a composite score of 44-52. So a student has to earn proficient or advanced on at least one of the exams, the 3 exams. That's algebra, literature, and biology. They have to score at least basic on the other 2, and then they have to have a total composite of at least 44-52. So that's looking at every student who didn't pass, and there's been a lot of work to find those students and say, okay, so they have reached that pathway, they can graduate. There was a waiver during 1920 in the pandemic, so no score was given to those students that year, so that really prevents us from using the composite score, because you can't use a composite score because they didn't take the exams. So that's been tough. So we're talking about the opt-outs. It has been very difficult. If you opt out, you can't meet graduation requirement by pathway 1 or pathway 2. Because one, you had to take the exam and pass it, and the second one, you needed a composite score, you didn't take the test. So now you can't graduate from 1 or 2. So now you have to go into career and technical education. Student passes Keystone course. That's a requirement for all of them. You have to pass the course. So you have to pass the course on all 3 and one of the following. So you can have an industry-based competency certification, which are readily available at Upper Bucks County Technical School. So if you are going there, you can earn it that way. Then this is the language that the state uses: likelihood of industry-based competency assessment success, which you would have to get from the Upper Bucks County Technical School. Readiness for continued engagement in CTE concentrator program. So this is a pathway that we work with Upper Bucks County Technical School to see students who are attending that school and if they can meet requirement that way. So that's another pathway. Students pass the Keystone course, again, and one of the following. So they're looking at alternate assessments. So now I pass my 3 courses and at least one of these. So if you take the ACT and you score 21, if you have the ASVAB and you score 31 points, PSAT, SAT, or an AP exam related to a Keystone course, which isn't likely if you didn't pass the course to begin with. Successful completion of a course related to the Keystone, and acceptance into, or not, this is one of them, acceptance into a 4-year institution of higher ed. So they are pretty broad in that regard. They do give kids options. And then the last one is Pathway 5. So again, I had to pass all the courses, and I need 3 pieces of evidence. So from group 1, I can have 1 to 3 pieces of evidence, and you can read those there, or group 2, either none of them or 2 of them. Up to 2 of them. So the state has broadened the way students can meet the graduation requirement. But again, the easiest one is to take the 3 exams and you're finished. But they have given the students these options, and we are working, and I would like to thank Mr. Vogel too, because he has been really instrumental in helping us create the system in Lincoln to be able to put all these numbers in to see how best we can get our students to graduate on time. So I do want to thank him. Is he still here? Yes, thank you, Mr. Vogel.
What is the Keystone course?
The keys, literature, bio.
All those courses?
Yes,
You
the
said-
3.
Okay.
I'm sorry, there's 3, right? And
There's
algebra
3.
1. And algebra 1 you can take in middle school.
So
we have-
when you're exempted for religious, you don't have to pass any of this stuff? Or, I mean, there's no requirement from the state for that graduation?
You have to use one of the other pathways.
Well, no, you still have to, okay.
You have to. You have to meet one of the pathways for state graduation.
Okay.
And it needs to be in our policy. So we need to open up our policy and put that in there. So there's no option.
Okay.
So if you don't meet 1, you have to do 2, 3, 4, or 5.
There's no way. Okay.
There's no, no. But some students can graduate on the basis of their IEP. So there certainly are exceptions for students.
And is this, I mean, we've been down this path before.
No pun
The war,
intended.
right? Is it for real this
It's
time?
real.
Okay, all right. So
It
it's
is
with
very
the class of 2023.
Yes, and it is real. They have to meet graduation requirements. And we're doing, like I said, we are working with everyone just to make sure that they do that.
It's 11th graders now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, they're our class, and we have the data. It's a lot of it, but we have it. And we would like to see more students take the exam, pass the exam, and just meet the graduation requirement that way. But again, we have these other options. We'll just make sure students follow through and earn that.
I know that in the beginning, the issue people have with the exams, I mean, the bio one in particular was really ridiculously out of what the students could have possibly learned. I remember looking at the questions myself and thinking, they're awful. And I think my oldest was the test, and I think the pass rate for proficiency was, gosh, it was like 57 or 67. It was very low for this exam. And when you think about it, there can't be, so they've improved these exams. That doesn't look like
Let's see, we know what is tested. There's eligible content, right? So what we can do, and that's what all good school districts do, we know what the eligible content is, and we embed it into our curriculum to ensure that we're teaching what those standards say that we need to teach, and then we go beyond that.
So
But
you're-
again, I mean, they have been difficult.
They,
Math has
you,
been difficult.
yeah, well, I think, so I don't want them to be, so you're saying you embed the content into the course, but you haven't turned the courses to being focused on teaching to these tests.
That is what we have never done at Pennridge.
Okay.
Never. But we are ensuring that the eligible content is in the curriculum. And then, of course, we go beyond that.
What percentage of the kids are using an alternative pathway, roughly?
I don't know what the percentage, you know what percentage it is?
It's not
Well, one of the reasons why we looked at this is like this first year, about 50% are through just with pathway 1, without looking at.
50%.
Yeah, a little over 50 just in the one first pathway. And that's without looking at those that took the Keystone Trigger courses during the pandemic year.
Use them.
Oh.
So there's additional people that will pass just from that alone.
So 50% will not? I mean, you have to find an alternative pathway, or?
Yeah, and, well, we're not done yet, because one of the things we're looking at is, and that's what Mrs. Clemmer is doing for us right now. We have her looking at those that might have to retake, like a lit, you know, in some cases, retaking a lit might take care of the requirements all in the
Okay.
first one. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Still a large number of people.
Correct. We think we
It's
can
a
get
lot.
another 50 to 80 just for retakes alone, which will take us to the 400 level. And the composite, the second one, gets us a whole chunk too. The 4452 with at least proficient at 1 in basic and all. We're going to get a chunk that way. And then the rest will get it through the different pathways.
Okay.
We have to remember there are so many students who opted out. So we're looking at
Yeah.
a large number of kids who didn't take that test. So that's a big percentage, more than we've ever seen in all the schools, PSSAs and Keystones.
What percentage is that about? Who opt out?
I don't want to say, because there were a lot. I can get you a percentage, but I don't want to say 20 if it was 15. But there were way more than we've ever seen. I remember opt-outs being like 15 total.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds. There were a couple hundred, at least at one middle school. I mean, there are a lot of students who didn't take it from the year of the pandemic, the year after. It's been rough that way.
Yeah.
It has, but we're working really hard on, especially the students who were on the cusp, and we can see where they were, and we're pulling them and providing the winter retakes in December, so we knew who those students who really probably could make it on their second try, took the eligible content that they didn't do well on and gave them extra work, extra practice. So we're going to take that cohort, see what we did, the intervention that we provided, and see how many of those students passed, so that we can keep replicating that intervention. Well, thank you for your attention. I know it's been a lot tonight. It's a lot to digest. And please know that we're coming from a place where we just want to expand opportunities for our students. And maybe there's other ways to do it, but we came here tonight with some recommendations. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're not expecting a decision on February 28th? Okay, that's probably good.
Is that kind of like a package thing, or would we be voting on each one individually?
Could they be individual, or really are they tied?
I think, right, the textbooks and personal finance.
Well, yeah, that's separate. I'm talking about the changes that you were talking about.
Is it all of the
one,
changes or none?
You mean for
We
the
can do it anywhere we
graduation
want, I mean,
requirements?
what do you?
Well, we're hoping for all of it, because we worked really hard on it, and it makes sense. So we would like to see all of that. And of course, we have no option with the other graduation requirement.
But the answer to your question is, graduation requirements are policy, and so that would be something that this board would have to approve.
No, I understand that.
And so that could be written any way the board, right, the board could decide you want to require 28 credits, right, and every kid has to fill every year. But, so yes, there are flexibility on the individual components of it, although some of them are connected to one another in terms of why one was recommended with another piece. And so we'll spend a lot of time, I'm sure we'll get community feedback now that this presentation has been made and people can listen to it. We'll obviously get the information from the science teachers that you asked for to be able to get in terms of that piece from them, as well as other questions you have as you have a chance to digest. There were lots of links in here to the aquatic survey, to some of the other presentations that you want some time to play with and ask questions, and then we'll decide next month what conversation needs to be had in terms of expanding upon it. So thank you, Dr. Shedd.
Is one option to keep 24 credits as a requirement? So you don't want to go down to bare minimum of 21 that Pennsylvania requires. But could you require 24 but you can make it your own, like, allow them more flexibility, even though I think what you have does present more flexibility. I don't know if my question's making sense. Like, instead of saying, you have to have, your 24 credits have to include 4 English. Could it be, you have to take 24 credits, and maybe you have to select within there at least one of those core things. So if someone who wanted to take more math, I don't know.
The state requires.
The state for English, yeah.
Right, the
Yeah,
bare minimum
bare
from the
for
state,
4.
you can't
So
go below that.
English wasn't a good example, but for the
But except
ones
for
that
that.
are lower than English, could you?
Right, so everything is based, in terms of the state, everything is based on standards. So the number of courses you offer is the number of courses it takes to complete the standards.
Okay.
So that is why they have that there.
So to kind of get to what you were saying, Mrs. Cullen, we could not require the additional social studies and not require the additional half credit of health, but still require 24 credits.
That's correct.
And then we're requiring basically the state's minimum requirements for each specific content area, but letting students choose how to fill the rest of their credits to get to 24 if the board still wants 24 credits, but wants the maximum flexibility as far as what they're choosing within it.
The only correction is that the state does have an arts and humanity, so we would need to make sure that we understand how students are achieving the arts and humanity, because if they're only doing 3 social studies. So we just need to make sure that that's obviously not part of
Right,
our
that's part of the
current
1.5, which is
That,
separate
so-
from the social studies.
Right, we just need to make sure that's not, in terms of how it's captured in the state, we would need to make sure that we capture that somehow in our recommendation, if we lower it in some other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to start a whole new conversation. It was just sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Shea.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what the path forward is? What the next steps are as far as this conversation and what direction we go?
Yeah, the next steps are to gather feedback and to see what questions there are, and then probably take another week or so, and then communicate to kind of see what other things you want us to investigate, what it needs to look like in March in terms of what pieces of this presentation are we having additional conversations on, so that maybe we can move closer to a decision in terms of what if this makes sense or there are adjustments that need to be made. So there are no voting options, there are no voting items coming out of this presentation for February, except for potentially some of those textbooks that may have had consensus that don't need to wait another month. So.
Right. All right. So our next curriculum committee meeting is scheduled for March 7th. And that brings us back to public comment. We do have one, Ross McLennan.
It's on.
No,
Not
not
on.
red. There you go.
It's on. Ross McLennan, Hilltown, and thanks for letting me give you public comment tonight. I wrote some notes down. Sounds like scheduling is a nightmare. It's good to see the interest in technology, math, science, physics, and STEAM. I vote for more lab time and offering more rigorous courses. Financial security course sounds great, and I vote to touch on entrepreneurial programming. Those are great ideas. From our own experience, testing out of freshman courses or getting credits before graduation can ease students' transition and save money, so that is very encouraging. We had 3 students, 2 engineers, and a biochem geek who graduated from Pennridge 6 to 8 years ago and went into secondary schools. They all took labs, and to answer your question, because I asked real quick, they said they could have used more. So let's not cut out labs, and that's really why I came here tonight. As an engineer myself, I can assure you that we need more, much more tech and hands-on labs for our students. Most of the candidates I interview are weak in exactly this area. No doubt about it. With our country slipping in world rankings, it's going to be imperative that our primary schools improve in the math and sciences to feed our manufacturing workforce. Our national interest in tech, manufacturing, and infrastructure have generated the largest demand for related jobs in a generation. These are stable, good-paying careers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We don't have anyone else for public comment, so we're going to end the curriculum committee meeting and take a 5-minute break before activities.
Ms.
Okay?
Cooper, would you let us know when the live stream is off?
these, because I was thinking, this is a weird setup. It's
Because they're also
We were talking about that.
So they are,
Grade
yeah.
swing.
So they hold
Yeah.
this turn, so you have two separate classes there.
Oh, right.
Yep.
Yep. So
It's your show.
thank you, Ms. Cooper.
No, I don't think we have any, well, we do have public, but not,
We never know, there's people here.
I don't think we have any,
We don't
there's
have
no
any
public
signs.
comment signed up.
Batisky, when you're ready. Thank you.
One more committee for tonight, Activities Committee, and we're gonna start with sleep and school start time recommendation with Dr. Rabarchik.
Good evening, everybody, and let's talk some sleep here. So, as you know, I just want to take this moment just to publicly acknowledge and thank the Adolescent Sleep and School Start Time Committee. This has been a long haul of 2 years, starting October 2019, pre-COVID, and they just did a great job. We had about 35 committee members on the team, and not everyone could make it to every meeting, but everyone stayed in touch with what was going on throughout the whole process. So I can't thank them enough, and I wanted to have that opportunity just to publicly thank them. So as we go through the presentation tonight, this is the report and initial recommendation. In addition to this presentation tonight, you will get a report that's still being finished, tweaked, and everything else. It's going to be about anywhere from 25 to 30 page report of all the work that was accomplished over the last 2 years. But when we start off with tonight, I just wanted to start with this quote because this is Dr. Judith Owens, who is a renowned sleep expert in adolescence, shared this with me at one point. And because a lot of the questioning of the science was the piece of it that everyone always has in mind. So if you take school time away from somewhere, you got to put it back somewhere, and that's the whole piece of it. But her focus was this quote, which I loved, and it's really just that primary focus of education is to maximize the human potential. Then a new task before us is to ensure that the conditions in which learning takes place addresses the very biology of our learners. And the one piece that we came together as a committee was to ensure that we all believe the science before we move forward. Because if you have to believe the science to really understand why we are even studying this long of a project to make sure our students' needs are best met. So the beginning of this presentation is going to be just an overview again. You've seen these slides, I know, and you've probably seen them in nausea, but I want to make sure we just hit why we entered this process and how it takes us to where our recommendation is for this evening. So the adolescence of needing 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night, and that the many organizations that endorse that, and just about the circadian rhythms of students and entering adolescence and throughout. And it just makes it difficult for them to get to sleep before 11 p.m. and prior to waking before 8 a.m. So many concerned parents and guardians and community members wanted to know how can our adolescents be getting enough sleep. And when we did the initial survey, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, we had over 2,000 responses. So it was a hot topic, and people were talking about wanting their adolescents to get more sleep. And these were some of the reasons why. If you look under health, safety, and performance, these are all of the science of the research that shows why there's different districts around the world looking at trying to help their students get additional sleep. And I won't go through all of these, but obviously under health, you're looking at depressed moods, decreased emotional regulation, increased weight gain. In the previous presentation, we were talking about the health and wellness and the importance of it. This falls right into that category. Again, the safety feature of it, the increase in motor vehicle crashes, increase in risk-taking behaviors, and so on. And again, performance. If you get more rest, your performance is going to increase. So, these are some of the reasons when you get less sleep and what could happen in the potentials. So, under the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and American Medical Association, the recommendation in the science is basically to start high school times at 8:30 a.m. or later. Obviously, we're at 7:15 right now. And so we're an hour and 15 minutes away from that start time, but there's other things that can come into play, and we'll talk about those as we get further into the presentation. So obviously the 8:30 start time would enable adolescents to achieve their 8 to 10 hours of sleep and to better align with their own circadian rhythm of that falling asleep and waking up. The wide changes in the delayed start times associated with positive outcomes. Obviously, you look at the negatives, you turn it into the positive, and some of the metrics that you would look at is starting later. Increased sleep durations, fewer motor vehicle crashes, less tardiness, less falling asleep in class, which we're going to see in our own data here. Some evidence of increases in GPAs, SATs, just the academic overall, and decreased health center visits. So all of these, which I've had personal experience with, and as a lot of you know, in my previous district, I was the co-chair of this study, and a lot of these were the metrics that we looked at, and it definitely made an impact with a later school start time. So here's our own students. So our own students took a survey in October of 2019, after a presentation by Dr. Jackie Kloss and Dr. Amanda Swain, who came in just to talk to the students about sleep deprivation. She didn't talk about changing school start times. She talked about their own sleep health and how it was impacting them. So the survey that was conducted was called the Teen Sleep Health Habit Survey. It was a normed survey out of the University of Minnesota, which they do a lot of studies on adolescent sleep. And these are just some highlights from our own survey that we conducted in December of this year. If you see, we had 914 high school students complete the survey. It was a mix, but heavily weighted with the 10th and 11th graders taking the survey this time around. So, and you see 86.2 of the students felt that they had a sleep problem overall. And depending on what it may be, it just might have been they felt tired or they need caffeine throughout the day, or other ways of coping with their tiredness. 61.5 of our students reported they get too little sleep, and that means they were getting the less than 8 hours. We started the 8 hours as the max. If you go back from there, like I said, 61.5% of our students are getting less than that 8 hour sleep. Nearly a third of our students surveyed self-reported sleep deprivation during the school day, meaning they were either falling asleep in class, they were napping in between classes at study hall, of all things. During lunch, a lot of kids will go and get into a corner and just be by themselves and fall asleep. So a lot of different ways that they were getting to try to make up for that lost sleep deprivation. 17.5 reported arriving to class late because they overslept. And that was anywhere from 5 minutes up to 20 minutes. 63.16 of the students surveyed preferred a later school start time. And that was a single shot question that we sent through Canvas that students answered. We gave them the different options that we were looking at in regards to school start times. And they indicated, based on those responses, the different options. 63% of them chose the later school start time. 50.2% of our students surveyed are getting the required amount of sleep per week. So about half of our students are getting the required amount of sleep during the school week. And if I took more highlights from the survey, you would see just more about the students who are going to bed naturally and waking up naturally. Obviously, you would see the trend go towards the weekends, is when they were falling asleep on their own and waking up on their own, without an alarm clock, without a cell phone going off, whatever it may be. But it was over half of our students are using some type of device to wake them up during the school week. So just on the formation of the committee, as I said, we did an initial feedback survey in 2019 when we initiated the committee. And we had, as I said, nearly 2,000 responses from community members. And really the responses were all over the place, but the majority of them obviously having concern for our adolescents and not getting enough sleep. We had nearly 100 community members express that they wanted to serve on the committee. We narrowed that down to the 35, as I said. It was a representation of business owners, parents, students, school administrators, teachers, and support staff. The committee met a numerous amount of times between October of 19 and actually just the beginning of this month. And we had the webpage memorialize all the work that was done through the sleep study. So the committee goals were basically to understand the health issue related to chronic sleep deprivation in adolescents, educate the community, which we brought in the experts to help kind of share some of that information, evaluate the impact on the Pennridge community, and then present a report and recommendations. And that's where obviously we stand. That third bullet down is really important, to evaluate the impact. That's what the committee had their hands working on and trying to identify, looking at student work schedules, looking at their sporting activities, just their club-related activities, their extracurricular outside of school activities. There's a lot that goes into understanding whether it's going to impact our community in a positive, negative way. So here are some of the things we looked at as we went through each of the options. We used these metrics as starting points. Transportation being one of the biggest, because obviously that has to work in order to get students to school on time at each of the 3 levels. The cost that it would endure, the before and after school care. Obviously, if you're starting students later or earlier, parents may need to take advantage of a before or after care for their students now costing them an additional amount of money that they weren't expecting. School athletics and bell schedules. So when we got down to it, we came up with our current schedule and 3 other options. And you should be familiar with these, as we spoke about these in a previous meeting about what we are looking to explore further. So our current being the 7:15 start and so across. You can read across the chart there where our times are currently. And then there was the second one, which is the half-hour push, where we literally just took everybody's schedule, high school, middle school, elementary schools, and pushed them a half an hour further out. And then we had what was called the combo. This was an interesting one. This kind of came to light as we started looking at transportation more and more, and whether we could do it, but made the most sense in regards to when you look at the times. It was combining our North Middle School students and our high school students from that attendance area to ride the bus together, and then have separate transportation for high school students in both the central and south areas, and central and south middle schools having their own transportation. And what it did, it allowed for a concurrent start at 8 a.m. for all secondary schools, which was nice, because we're not moving the middle schools, but we're giving the high school some additional time for the students to sleep. And then again, if you look at the elementary schools, it didn't touch really. It pushed them about 10 minutes further than where they are from the current time. And then the last one, we had the flip. That was an 8:15 start for our high school students, and then pushing the middle school students back earlier to a 7:25 start. But you see what happens to the elementary students. You know, our current times are 8:35 and 8:50. We do a two-tier for our elementary. Guth and Sellersville are the earlier schools. The other 5 schools are the elementary schools that are the later time. And you can see it now pushes to a 9:05, 9:20 start. So the issue you get to when you're pushing the elementary schools back later is the end of the day, where they're not getting out until 4:05 in the afternoon and getting home closer to 5 o'clock as compared to where they're getting home closer to 4:30 at the current time. So in the last column, which is one of the areas we'll definitely talk about, additional buses, and it should say / drivers needed. So our current, obviously we don't need any drivers or buses at this time. Our transportation department, and kudos to them as well, have worked very hard to, even in this past year, from last year to this year, go from 96 routes down to 81 routes. So they found efficiencies, and that was through the transportation study that we conducted, as well as just using a new software to help them better establish routes and combining some neighborhoods or eliminating some additional stops that weren't needed. Because if you think about it, every stop, you know, you got an average of 2 to 3 minutes that you're loading students and, you know, waiting for them to get on and then proceeding in your route. So we did find some efficiencies as we went through that process. The half-hour push would require additional buses and drivers, and we'll get into how many as we go into the presentation. The combo, as much as we love it, as much as I love it, I'll be honest, there was a significant change to the amount of buses and drivers needed. I don't want to ever rule it out still, because I think there's still opportunities to explore that further, but that was the one of the option that resulted in additional drivers and buses that were beyond what I would have imagined. And then the flip, yes, still would need additional buses and drivers. When I say additional buses, I want to clarify, these are the large 72 passenger buses that would be required. We're not talking about vans or the microbuses or anything like that. We're talking about full-size buses that would be necessary to accommodate that start time. So the half-hour push, the elementary students would be getting home somewhere to the 2021 school year for Dibler and Bedminster. So during the COVID years, I call it, we did have those 2 elementary schools ending at 4:05. Students were getting home anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes later, so close to that quarter to 5 mark. The one thing I will say is we didn't have many parents call us and say, hey, where's my child? This is too late, or anything like that. They made changes to their own life schedules after talking to some of the parents and how they adapted to that time change. I think the other positive thing in their head, though, was saying, hey, this is going to be a 1-year deal. I got to deal with this. So there's, good and bad to it in both ways. So with this half-hour push, there would be a need for at least 10 additional buses and drivers due to conflicts with the private schools. So the private schools is kind of the biggest conflict when you get into the meat of transportation. So we have 23 private schools who are all calling for the attention of our needs between the hours of 7:45 and 8:30, all different starting times. So, and of course, when you have 1 or 2 students going to one private school, it makes it even that more complicated. The other component that makes it difficult in our district is being 97 square miles. So if you have a student who's going to Lansdale Catholic, for example, and they live in Ottsville, they can go from Ottsville all the way down to Hilltown, to the opposite end of our attendance area, and then we're required to offer for 10 miles outside of our attendance area. So you talk about that ride time alone, and that's for maybe 2 or 3 students. It requires a lot of time, but it requires a full bus. So that's where you get into the situation where you have to look at the conflicts that are happening with the private schools and why we would need those additional buses. This plan, though, this option, the half hour, would have minimal impact on school events and athletics, and offers at least amount of increased sleep time for our professional recommendations. The minimal impact on school athletics and events, a lot of people go, but it's a half an hour. How can it only be, just a minimal impact? So when talking with Mr. Hagan, our competitions start at 3:30. So the time that kids are getting out at 2:15 now, they have a lot of dead time, is what we called it, and then a half an hour to stretch still before the actual competition. So pushing to 2:45 would just reduce the amount of dead time they have and still allow for competitions to start at 3:30. The practices would be slightly impacted, obviously, because when they do get out at 2:15, they're getting to practice about 2:30. So that would push the practices about a half an hour longer. The next option was the flip. Again, going the furthest areas of the district and being able to meet the dismissal times and staging at the high school became a difficulty in the plan. And what I mean by that is right now we have the high school, then the middle school, and then the elementary school. So you're going to the furthest out areas, going into the high school, going to your attendance areas of your individual middle schools, dropping them off, and then just going to the smaller area of your elementary school, dropping them off. So in the flip situation, you're now going to those middle schools, which is the 1/3 biggest, or if you think of it as the donuts, as Jessica always said, the middle donut, and then having to go to the biggest donut, that's a difficulty in getting the buses, the kind of that wave in and out from where they're going to one school to then the middle schools, then going to the high school, coming to the biggest school, and then going to your small schools. So it just caused a lot of conflict as those routes were being developed. And the one piece is when the buses come in the afternoon to the high school, they're the first pickup in the day. So the staging and what is it called, the bus? What do you guys?
The lineup.
The lineup out there, the bus road out in the middle of the in front of the high school, where it's 3 rows of buses, can go get into staging positions without a problem because they know when they're supposed to get there and it's not an issue. If they're going out and servicing the middle schools, then coming back to the high school, they're all coming back at different times. So it makes the staging a little bit more complicated in regards to where they need to be, which would increase additional time needed to get them set up in that area. So the length of the route would increase significantly on this option. Again, because of where the buses are going and how they're going out to the outer edges, coming into the middle schools, going back out to the very edges again, coming to the high school. So there was a lot more increase in the length of time the student was riding on the bus. The elementary requiring even later end times, resulting in students being dropped off, again, close to that 5 o'clock mark, between 4:45 and 5 o'clock. And this plan was looking at needing approximately 10 to 12 additional buses and drivers that will be required. And then again, the timing logistics of the middle school are now starting 30 minutes earlier. So that could be an impact for some middle school students because again, the goal is to get your biggest population of adolescents, which is at the high school, and the middle school does have a smaller population of those students who are just entering puberty and getting into that different circadian rhythm as their bodies develop. And then again, the combo, which we, again, kind of my favorite to be honest, just overwhelming when you look at it, but the length of the routes would be comparable to current times, another positive to that. But this is where it gets a little bit more complicated. Additional 21 buses and drivers would be required. And then we also recognize that additional buses and drivers would be needed for special education routes, meaning wheelchair buses. And really, when looking at all 3 plans, we're somewhat in that same situation, the need for additional special education routes. The timing of the private schools again and the special aid placements had the impact on the secondary start times. And our private schools would need to be requested to adjust their bell times. Because one of the things that we discussed was for the private schools, we're required to deliver their students to and pick them up at the end of the day. They set their school start times and end times, but our goal is that we need to get them there by that time. If we get them 15 minutes earlier than what we used to, they would just need to be required for establishing supervision for those students. Now, you have to be reasonable in your approach, working with the private schools, but you could easily make requests to ask them to either adjust their bell times or have supervision of students in order to accommodate our own transportation needs. So the potential ideas to address our need for buses, determine the number of juniors and senior high school students who are drivers and not need district transportation services. We are getting more parking spots in the future as well, but we have a lot of students who drive already. So our ridership, especially at the high school level, is significantly decreased over time. So that means you could combine more runs and routes for the high school level. But again, we would need to determine how those juniors and seniors, and again, knowing that they're not going to take the bus the entire year because you're not going to be able to change the route mid-year. Another possibility would be incentives for families whose students who do not use district transportations. I like this. Dr. Bolton, actually, I believe you brought this to my attention. Making a credit for your lunch account, or Philadelphia. I did look into this. Philadelphia actually gives an actual credit to people, like $75 a month for not driving or not having their child take the bus to school. So there are incentives that we could use, but obviously that would take a lot more time to develop and put something like that into play.
How about carpooling?
Carpooling would be another one to ask, if you could get that.
Yeah,
So just to put it in perspective, Jessica Krause and Rose Warble, the director and assistant director of transportation, route every student on a bus route each year. Because even for the juniors and seniors who may be driving, their car breaks down. Or something that mom's car, they get in an accident and now they need a car, that parent needs a car. So now that child needs to get on the bus. So they have to have a route established. And that's where you would have to establish some type of plan where if you say you're opting out of taking district transportation, they're going to have to make other accommodations to get to school. And we don't want them not showing to school, obviously. So just to put it again in perspective, a bus currently costs about $100,000 per bus and about $45,000 per additional driver. That's salary and benefits. And just as of early this morning, we looked up in regards to the cost of bus, and they have increased by 5%. So put another $105,000 on that now. It's interesting because we are talking about the supply and demand chain and what's going on. And that was one of the pieces. We're just having a conversation about it this morning with Ms. Krause because we were talking about the cost of used cars and everything else going up. That buses are also going up as well. The private schools establishing drop-off pickup times to accommodate new Pennridge school district start and end times. That's another thing that we'll look at. We'll have some conversations with the private schools. Again, I did this in my previous district. Had conversations with the president of the private schools of that area, and we were able to get 4 or 5 schools, I think it was 4, to actually change their top start times in order to align with us so we could have better transportation models. And then kids care, providing kids care before and after. Again, currently we operate on a 7:30 to 9 a.m. shift and a 3:30 to 6 p.m. shift. And the programs are capped based on space, availability, and staffing. And as you all know, or may know, some of you have dealt with helping out with kids care in regards to offering them some help in their current situation because they can't get staff at this point. We've actually collapsed some of the programs in some of our schools and moved them to other ones. Now we're back to full capacity again, but the registration numbers are still well below what it was pre-COVID. He's about only at 50% of his enrollment of where he was. So initial recommendation, I don't know if it's actually a recommendation, but it is to some degree. Each option was reviewed for consideration. And again, I can't thank the committee enough. We spent February 1st or 2nd, I think, 1st, sitting together via Zoom and in person and literally going through each one of the options in depth and then really having some collaboration time to talk with others about which of the options made most sense. So the committee deliberated and the positive and negatives for each of the options explored. And after synthesizing the input and following the initial recommendation is being brought forward is first and foremost to not engage in a change for next year. There is just so much uncertainty still for staffing, and that's meaning drivers for the buses. As we know, we have a shortage across the country, and it's not getting any better, unfortunately. And if we're sitting here in February at this point and still losing drivers, I can't imagine that in September it's going to be any better. And the other piece is our current supply chain issues that we manufacturing of buses. We ordered 4 new buses last, what was it, David, do you help me recall?
Yeah, I believe they were in July.
July, 4 buses, and they were supposed to be now starting production on those this month. There's no guarantee of that. So again, they're just so far behind that if we would consider getting 10 buses and you would be in agreement with that, we're not going to see them anytime soon. So that would be a concern. We did have a split decision on the half-hour push and the flip. Those were the 2 that rose to the top. And those were the 2 options that were demonstrating the need for 10 to 12 additional full-size buses and drivers. There were a couple of us that still would really like to see the combo come through and explore that further. So obviously, right now it would be, if not implementing a change for the new school year, we would continue planning on looking at the reduced number of vehicles. Planning can occur for the possibly reduce the number of vehicles and drivers needed to implement one of those options. Meaning still looking at the routes, still looking at the efficiencies, and see if we could even get that 81 routes down to 75. I mean, it is a possibility. So that would definitely help the situation. You know, now we're only needing 5 buses, and we have 4 on the way. Could we make it work somehow for that following year? So our next steps is to continue to explore the transportation options and limitations of the staffing, the vehicles, and the routing. But the one thing that I want to really give credit to our student representative that attended the meeting on February 1st. And first and foremost, when she went to the first option, she said, well, if we can't change times, can we still at least talk about how to help our students get more sleep without making a change in time? And, you know, a lot of that is about cell phones, kids leaving cell phones on at night. You know, a notification goes off, that blue light, you know, hits them and it causes brain activity. Packing their lunch, setting out their clothes. I know it sounds silly, but, you know, setting out clothes the night before saves you 3 minutes in the morning. You know, get you a little bit more sleep in the morning. Avoiding the caffeinated drinks in some way, or educating kids more on what the effects are of caffeinated drinks. When Mr. Schoonover and I conducted the student forums, we met with certain groups of students throughout 9th through 12th grade, and I couldn't believe how many had talked about the caffeinated drinks that they're drinking, the monster drinks, the energy drinks. You know, it was worrisome when you started listening to, you know, I need this to be able to stay up at, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, an energy drink at 9 in the morning just doesn't seem appealing in any way. And just helping them establish routines. I love the fact of, we talk about the personal finance, it's also going to roll over into just helping them be more organized overall, and just putting some routines into their play of how they go throughout their day. So those are the next steps right now. And sadly, as much as I would like to see a school start time change for next year, I think we're in a position where we need to kind of stay status quo and really continue the exploration and hope that things improve and we can do something for the following school year.
So I'm also a fan of the 8 o'clock plan. Remind me though, so for the other 2 plans, it's like 10 to 12 buses, and for the 8 o'clock, it was 20?
21.
21.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big number. Yes.
Where would,
Yeah, I had a question on the combo though. The traffic coming into this high school when they're dropping off kids in the morning, it goes all the way up to the ridge sometimes.
Right.
And if you put the middle school drop off and the high school drop off, the traffic in this area would be unmanageable. So there would have to be some solution for that too.
There would be. We actually spoke to Joe Gallo, our head of security, or our school police officer, just about looking at traffic routines around the school. Dr. Bolton and I did a very informal observation of dismissal at one point just at the high school, because that was one of the concerns that came from a lot of the students and the teachers at one point, was the amount of time it takes to get out of the high school even at dismissal. But then as we sat there and watched the timing of the light and watching the flow of the buses, 15 minutes at most, 15 minutes to get, I mean, it was empty. There was no one. So, but I understand the concern, because now you got middle school at the same time.
Right.
So it would take some traffic variables to look at just to make sure there wouldn't be any more conflicts.
Or like the staggered parent drop-off or something. Yeah.
Right.
Different time.
Could you also look, because the combo does sound nice too. Could you look at, I know you'd have to like honestly like do like a hard survey and get people to confirm that they would be driving or how many people they would be driving, but could you kind of like play around with the numbers and say if we had X amount of kids that would not need transportation, then we would only need X amount of buses instead of 21? Like how many would we need, how many kids would we need to be able to drive or parents to drop their kids off so that we could lessen that number? I don't know what.
And that would be a goal.
Yeah.
That's exactly the goal of doing those other pieces there. And I think it was, what was it? It was the term, that all three of those. When looking at those, then we can reduce the number of buses that would be needed, hopefully.
I just was wondering, did you think about, supposing you did get 21 additional buses, is there parking for 21 additional buses where we keep our buses now?
So speaking with Mr. Harper, there is an addition that it's getting redone over there at the bus
And
yard.
it would fit?
So we talked to him about that, and it actually fits exactly 20 more buses, which I was amazed. And I didn't give him the number ahead of time, because I was like, okay, so what do you think you could put over there? The only thing is we'd have to somehow find some spots for some of the smaller, a couple of the smaller buses that are back there now, because that smaller parking lot up front is not capable of holding any additional vehicles. But it was pretty amazing when I asked him, he's like, 20. I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, there you go.
And then I just walked away from it.
All right, and then at some point, I guess if you just wanted to share, if there was like a compilation of what people's objections to the combo plan were, so I can, you know, maybe just look through and to understand their thought process in getting
Sure.
to rejecting.
Honestly, and Dr. Bolton was at the meeting as well, so if I'm missing anything, please let me know. But I think really the riding of middle school and high school students, there was some discussion about that, which I don't have an issue with, because I'll be honest with you, there is 50% of Pennsylvania districts, I think we're just not used to it because we don't live in those more rural areas, but high school and middle school students ride on the bus together pretty much in the other areas. Now that was a report from about 5-6 years ago, but about 50% of shared transportation in those levels. The other piece was, I think when people saw the 21 buses, I think it threw them for a loop, going, oh my gosh, that's just way too much. How are we ever going to do that? Talking about $2 million plus to add to a budget and everything else. I think there was more of a reservation around that piece of it. The times were very attractive to people though. I mean, like I said, the concern with the other ones that people were still leaning towards a little bit were just those later elementary schools. And we even talked about that. We're like, if we could shave off 5 minutes somewhere even at the elementary, we work on that. But and that's what you sort of do when you work with the transportation models. As you tweak the models as they go along, you find 5 to 7 minutes, and it makes a whole lot of difference. Instead of getting out at 4:05 and you're getting out at 3:57, the mindset is like, I'm getting out before 4 o'clock, so this works for me. So, those are some of the things we will look at though.
One more question. So with some of the new developments being built, do we have a sense of how many more buses we'll have to purchase to accommodate those?
So we don't as of yet. Right now, with the developments that are going into place, because I did ask Ms. Krause about this, we would not need any additional buses, because when you're looking at a development of 75 houses from K to 12, and a lot of townhouses are going up. And generally, I want to say it's 1.2 students per household is the townhouse piece. So you're looking at a spread between K to 12 of 75 new students, somewhere around that at most. It's not that impactful. We do have one larger community going up in the area off of Park and Old Bethlehem Pike. That's going to be, I think, close to 200 units, townhouses and houses. That may be somewhere where it falls in, and we may need to, a couple additional buses. But that is part of the process that Jessica looks at on a regular annual basis to determine what is that increase going to be as part of her budget. And that just helps her to determine, okay, how many buses am I trading in compared to how many do I want to hold on to?
Okay.
All
That's
right.
it?
One more question. So what's the plan going forward? Or do we have a time frame when we're going to say, hey, let's go
So-
do this? Because I don't want to just let it drag out. I mean,
Yep.
everybody agrees that we need to get the kids more sleep, but and there's a cost associated with it.
Sure.
But we don't want to be sitting here in a year and discussing this again.
No, so the goal in talking to Mrs. Kraus and the transportation piece of this all was to continue to work over the, this spring and into the summer and come back in the fall and give you an update. Because what you need in regards to preparation for transitioning to new school start times, on average is about 6 months. So, if you look at it, you're looking at this time of the year, February, March, that you want to have to get a response, a decision made by the school district for the following school year, so you can put in your steps
Well,
to address
unless
it.
your bus delivery is a year, then you have to make a decision even earlier. I mean,
Correct.
If we're going to do something.
Correct, and we will have to do that. And again, but with the hope of looking at these options, talking to private schools, maybe aligning their start times and everything. Again, going from 10 buses, even if we started a half an hour push, some districts have phased in change to school start times, knowing you may have to do a half an hour push for 3 years, and then 3 years later, you want to go for that full hour, or whatever it may be.
Do we have access to, it's a lot of schools who have done this, and
Mhm.
successes, what they haven't done, or how many schools in Pennsylvania have done that about? I know.
Pennsylvania, I don't know. In this area, Quakertown just moved theirs, a simple, I want to say it was half an hour they moved. Phoenixville, Radnor, Chadsford Union, Unionville, Chadsford. So there's a lot locally that we have talked to and I've had connections with and spoke with them. And the biggest thing is each individual district is so unique though to your own needs. And that's the piece. And my previous district, no secret, was Radnor. And we were 12 square miles, compact, more urban, 97 square miles. It makes a huge difference. Down there, I was dealing with 80 private schools. Here, we're with 23. So there, you can work with it, but that's the whole thing when you do a study, because a lot of people will say, well, why don't you just look at their study, bring it here, and repeat the process? It's not as easy just because you're looking at so many different dynamics that make up the community itself.
Yeah, definitely.
These studies that indicate the increased sleep duration, fewer motor vehicle crashes, improved attendance, does that relate to a half an hour increased sleep time? We're talking about half an hour.
It does not. So if you talk to Dr. Judith Owens, one of her things is get what you can get out of it. Get the most what you can.
But it just seems like somebody needs to do a risk-benefit analysis for half an hour to spend, $2 million. If the study was, hey, if you get an extra 2 hours out of it, maybe it's worth it, but to get an extra half an hour.
Yeah. And her motto was basically to get students as much sleep as possible. If you're getting them half an hour more, you're getting them half hour more, if that's what works for your community and you can make that work. Obviously, her overall recommendation is always the 8:30 start time, 8:30 or later, no matter what. And that's what was more attractive about the combo, was because you were getting 8 o'clock and getting closer to that ultimate time that they're getting more rest in their body and they can be more productive as a student.
Okay. Last item for tonight.
The last item, and I believe you have copies of this, This is the emergency instructional time template. It's the section 520 of the PDE. And each year we are, it's been during COVID, I shouldn't say every year, this is the last couple of years. This is the document that allows you, if there were any emergency situations as a result of COVID, which I don't see happening, I hope, but anyways, if there was another shutdown the way there was, and you put a plan in for remote learning, you submit your plan in regards to how students will learn remotely, setting a schedule, establishing routines, how you will assign work, how you will collect work. So on the documents that you have in front of you, you will see on number 1 is just a collection of our number of student days. And then on number 2 is the different approaches to how we will address using remote learning if we were to have an emergency shutdown for any COVID-related situations. And all this does is protect you to save you from, if you fall short of the 180 days, 900 hours, 990 hours for secondary, in regards to meeting the state requirement for the year. So all it is, again, it just establishes the plan. This is the remote plan that you would use if there was an emergency shutdown for some reason, and we want to make sure that we acquire our 180 days, 900/990 hours. So what this requires is to go in front of you as a board, so you can see what our plan is, that we check off all the check marks for number 3, and that it gets approved at a school board meeting, and then we submit this to Pennsylvania Department of Education along with 2 sample schedules, the elementary and the secondary, and basically they have it on hand and approve it and say, you've done your due diligence.
So Pennsylvania Department of Education is mandating that we do this now because of what happened when we shut down the first time.
Correct.
So it's like a must.
It saves you. It's not a must, but if you don't do it, then some wild thing happens in regards to having to shut down for some reason because of an emergency with COVID or whatever, then this protects us in getting our covering us for our 180 days.
So like, sorry, just playing opposite, I know it's late, I'm sorry, but like with what we did before, and then we went virtual, we shut down, we had to go virtual. Can we just do the same thing? Like, why do we have to have something like I guess you're saying it protects you, but
it protects your calendar. This is saying that you've met the compliance of the 180 days, 990 hours.
Okay.
And Ms. Bungum, remember that the state statute does not currently allow for remote days to count towards that 180.
Right.
Which is why they have to put this into place.
Okay.
Right, because we were violating the law 2 years ago by what they made us do.
Okay.
No, it's silly, but that was where it was. And so this, instead of actually addressing the law, they've put this provision in place, these emergency acts. So these are really just in our pocket that if something we don't foresee happens, our students will get credit for the year and still will be able to move on to whatever comes next. There is almost no chance that we'll need to utilize this, but you put this in place just in case.
So, and I want to just clarify, so the plan is they are going to do this for next year again as well. So we will be completing the application. This is separate from the flexible instructional days that we can apply for, which we will be applying for that for next year as well. So if we have that blizzard of 2023 and we need 7 days off and we can still provide remote learning, those days, again, same as this model, could count towards your 180 days. But this is just for the emergency instructional time piece under the statute of 520.
Okay. I'm sorry, I know it's late, just one more question.
Yeah.
If we wouldn't go with this and we had to go in an emergency and we were not going to get 181 days, could you just essentially tack it on to the end of this whenever you were not in an emergency and say, okay, we're going to, we run out of snow days and we add it on to the end?
So up until, the way it works in the past, up until June 30th, you can. But after that, if you still don't meet your required days by June 30th, then there's the possibility of your subsidy being penalized.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what kind of protects you in this sense, for sure.
Is there a way to make it more, my hesitation with something like this is, I never want to do willy-nilly implementation of remote learning. In my mind, that time's passed. You know, we had to live through it. We all know that it's less than ideal, I guess we'll say, for kids for learning. And I wouldn't want to agree to this without the understanding, and I'm not making any judgment of anyone, but
Yes.
this isn't to be used just at the drop of a hat. Like, we
No.
need to, it needs to be the last resort possible.
Correct.
And then I guess, when does this need to be turned in to PDE?
So this one, so for whatever reason, all of a sudden we got an email that said, hey, Pennridge, you didn't turn yours in this year. So this one, unfortunately, by the end of February, has to be submitted to PDE.
Okay.
And we have to vote on it at the February meeting?
It has to be a vote on it, and then I have to submit the board minutes with the application and the schedules that are provided that you have.
Okay.
And could we put something in there? Like, could we talk to the solicitor and see about putting something in there just to also be covered? That's not like something that could just turn on us in the future and be like, well, we should just use this right now, because remote learning is just so, I don't know, is there something that we can even put in there, like a?
I would talk to Mr. Miller, but I think because this is a PDE document, I doubt that we can revise it in any way.
Okay.
But I think what you're saying is their last resort too. They don't want you using it just for that purpose. It is really just to, if you were in an emergency situation, and I think that's why they titled it the way it is they don't want you just to willy-nilly just say, here you go, take a remote day, we're gonna use our emergency instructional time. They truly only want you to use it for emergency situations. And I don't foresee in regards to how we've progressed as a district and, in regards to not wanting to utilize remote learning, I don't foresee us using this. But again, you never know what could happen, that it would just protect us.
Does this get renewed on an annual basis?
It does. This is only the second year.
Okay, all right,
So-
but it is an annual basis.
It is an annual basis, and next year, you'll be seeing it earlier, obviously. For next year, again, we don't know what happened. All of a sudden, it was an email that showed up from the individual who is now my best friend, and saying, hey, you didn't turn yours in. I'm like, I didn't know we had to. So.
We're not gonna, no, I'm just kidding.
Well.
I'm kidding, turn them.
And please, I just, in regards to one last comment, I know we were late, but the sleep study piece, if you have any additional comments or any thoughts, please don't hesitate to contact me. That committee will be working, continue to work as a group. They may not be getting together as often because a lot of this is administratively now. Like, it's a lot of work through Jess Krause and the transportation department and really working through those pieces, which just not general knowledge and understanding to to a lot of people. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Yeah, there's no public
No other
left.
public comment.
No.
I'll
Okay.
stay in the audience.
Ms. Cooper, if you would let us know when we're off.